Libby. Well, while we wait for Senator Libby, I think we can go ahead and start with introductions. Welcome to this meeting of the Government Oversight Committee. This meeting is being broadcast live and recorded on the Government Oversight Committee's YouTube channel. The audio stream is also broadcast on the legislature's website. A few reminders before we get started. The legislature's audio stream is turned on at the scheduled start time for the meeting. The YouTube stream is turned on at the start of the meeting and will remain on until the end of the meeting. When you're on the Zoom meeting platform and your camera or microphone are on, whatever you say or do will be seen or heard, even during breaks. Please remember to mute yourself when you are not speaking and to turn off your video if you need to leave the meeting at any time. Written materials for this meeting have been mailed or distributed electronically to committee members and have been posted on the OPEGA website at the start of this meeting under the GOC meeting section. The OPEGA director and staff may share documents on the screen as needed. During the meeting, the chair will recognize committee members, staff, or others to participate. Members may get the attention of the chair by using the raised hand function in Zoom, raising or waving their physical hand on camera, or making a request by chat in Zoom. Please remember that the Zoom chat function should not be used for any substantive discussions or committee business because it is not visible to the public. Please limit use of the chat to getting the attention of the chair or getting help with technical issues. Staff will be monitoring the chat for technical issues committee members may be experiencing and will respond via chat or contact LIT as needed. Finally, a reminder that for any vote taken, members must be verifiable through audio and video. We'll start by introducing committee members, but before I do so, I'd like to welcome our new Government Oversight Clerk and OPEGA Secretary, Sabrina Carey. Welcome to Government Oversight, Sabrina.
Thank you.
I'm Representative Genevieve McDonald. I'm the House Chair of Government Oversight, and I will introduce committee members as they appear on my screen, starting with Representative Mark Bleier.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Mark Bleier. I represent District 22, which are the great towns of.
Oh, you're muted, Representative.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, yes, I'm Representative Mark Bleier. I represent District 22, which are the great towns of Leamington and part of Buxton, Standish, and Limerick.
Thank you, Representative Sawin Millet.
Were you introducing me, Representative?
I was.
Okay, I'm Solon Millet. Good morning, everyone. House District 71, towns of Norway, Sweden, Waterford, and West Paris.
Senator Lisa Keim.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Keim, and I'm proud to represent Senate District 18, which is northern Oxford County, in two communities in Androscoggin.
Representative Amy Arata.
Good morning. My name is Amy Arata. I represent House District 65, which includes New Gloucester and part of Poland.
Representative Holly Stover.
Good morning. My name is Holly Stover. I represent House District 89, including the towns of Boothbay Harbor, Southport Edgecombe, Westport Island, and part of South Bristol.
Senator Donna Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Donna Bailey, and I proudly serve the residents of Senate District 31, which is Hollis, Leamington, part of Buxton, Saco, and Old Orchard Beach.
Senator Jeff Timberlake.
Good morning. I'm Senator Jeff Timberlake. I represent District 22, which is most of the towns in Androscoggin County and a couple of towns in Kennemack.
Representative Maggie O'Neill.
Good morning. My name's Maggie O'Neill and I represent House District 15, which is in Saco. And I just want to make a note that I'll be leaving a little bit early if folks see that. I just had a conflict later.
Senator Rick Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Rick Bennett. I have the honor and privilege of serving 13 towns in the foothills and lakes region of beautiful parts of Western Maine here in the State Senate.
Senator DeChambeau.
I'll begin by saying bonjour after a beautiful day yesterday, Franco Day in the House. That was lovely. And yes, I am State Senator Susan DeChambeau from District 32. I represent Dayton, Lyman, Alfred, Arundel, Kennebunk-Port, and my hometown of Biddeford. Thank you.
And Senator Nate Libby.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nate Libby. I proudly represent all of the people of Lewiston, beautiful town, sitting on the Great Falls of the Androscoggin. And it's nice to see you all this morning. I serve as the Senate co-chair.
Thank you, everyone. And I represent House District 134, which is the offshore islands of Penobscot Bay and Western Frenchman's Bay. If I could direct members' attentions to the summary of August 11th, 2021 Government Oversight Committee meeting and refer you to the meeting summary provided to members. Our item of new business today is the OPEGA report on evaluation of the Maine seed tax credit. We'll have a public hearing today. I'm going to turn this over to Director Nixon.
Sure. So we presented the seed capital tax credit evaluation report at your last meeting. You're having the public hearing today, which is part of the regular process. Anyone wishing to testify should be registered for the Zoom webinar and have sent any written testimony to OPEGA. If you are hearing this and you're not registered for the webinar and would like to testify, you can go to OPEGA's website and under GOC meetings, click on the link provided for those wishing to testify. Once you click that and register, you would get an email to connect to Zoom. So the chairs will be promoting attendees to panelists one by one to give their testimony. And then we'll get demoted back to attendee when they're finished just to manage the screen. And then we'll keep moving through the list. The chairs have a list that they've been provided of people who have signed up to testify. And also just note for those who are prepared to testify, when you are promoted or demoted, it might appear that you get kicked out of the meeting, but it's just a pause in the Zoom, reassigning you from one role to the next. So I will hand it back to Representative McDonald to go through the calling people to testify based on the list that you have. And we also ask that when people are done offering testimony that they exit the Zoom meeting and watch the rest of the meeting if you wish on the YouTube channel. That just keeps management of the Zoom meeting effective for us. And you can submit written testimony at any time by email to goc@legislature.maine.gov or to Sabrina Carey at OPEGA.
Thank you, Director Nixon. I will read the names of the first three people signed up to testify so that you can be prepared for your turn. As we near the end of those three, I will read the names of the next three people to testify and so on until we have gone through the list of registrants. After this, I will ask if there are any other people wishing to testify. At that time, please use the raise hand function if your name has not been called. The GOC will now receive comment from the public on the OPEGA report on evaluation of the Maine seed tax credit. First on the list to testify, we have Nathaniel Henshaw, Tim Agnew, and John Burns. Sabrina, if you could please move them over, we would appreciate that.
Can I interrupt for just one quick second?
Yes.
I just want to announce that at about 11:15, I'm going to have to step out for a few minutes. I don't want to interrupt while everything is going on. So if you see me vanish, that's because I got another commitment going on and I'll be back.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate you letting us know. does appear Nathaniel Henshaw has been moved over. Whenever you're ready to start.
Good morning, Senator Libby, Representative McDonald, and distinguished members of the Government Oversight Committee. My name is Nat Henshaw. I'm a Brunswick resident and president of CEI Ventures, Inc., the socially responsible venture capital subsidiary of CEI, a 43-year-old community development financial institution based in Brunswick. Using the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit program, CVI helps create good quality jobs for all people, including those with low incomes. First, I'd like to commend the Office of Program Evaluation and Government Accountability on this very substantive report. We'd like to comment on a few of the following questions raised by the evaluation. One has to do with whether if a company has gone sort of belly up, if you will, that in fact there's substantial benefit otherwise, that these companies often create a number of quality jobs and catalyze investment, which can be complicated and challenging. For example, a company may increase its workforce significantly due to a specific investment, provide workers with valuable training and transferable skills in the process, and it may be difficult to quantify the talent that was nurtured, business innovation that was fostered, state and federal taxes that were paid, and community impacts and social costs that were evaded and by the company while it was running. Additionally, former employees might likely go on to create other successful companies, hire and train additional workers, and contribute to a business ecosystem that perpetuates the cycle of innovation and entrepreneurship, i.e., if companies die, it's not necessarily failure. And I'd also note that a venture portfolio typically does have a number of companies that fail inevitably, and that the winners vastly make up for those that don't succeed. Therefore, one successful company that goes on to create a few hundred jobs can make up for many or even a majority of companies that go out of business or fail to reach full potential. That's just as you look at the list of companies that have received the tax credit. At CVI, we measure job creation in our portfolio by measuring jobs at initial investment and then quarterly over the investment period until we exit. The difference each quarter and upon exit being the number of net new jobs. Between October 1, 18 and September 30th, 2020, we invested nearly $1.6 million into qualifying companies. These funds were leveraged 7 times, both by in-state and out-of-state investors, other equity investors. Furthermore, during the 2-year period, and despite a global pandemic, these companies created 46 quality benefited jobs in the state of Maine. As we emerge from the pandemic, hiring these companies continues to increase at an accelerated rate. So that's about $34,000 of our investment and 17 or so of Maine Seed Capital tax credit money per job created so far. There's always considerable discussion in the report around investments which would have happened anyway. Regarding these types of investments by interested investors, it's important to note that the Maine Seed Capital tax credit serves as critical incentive to put needed money into existing portfolio companies. It's possible that this will be the crucial difference between a company's survival or failure. This becomes even more critical during a recession and specifically applies to the economic turmoil brought about by the current COVID-19 pandemic. CVI measures equity leverage on investments. It may be evident, yet it's still important to emphasize that equity is catalytic. Growing businesses need equity funding to secure debt financing as the two complement each other. While debt is often used to finance hard costs such as equipment purchases, real estate, or facility improvements, Equity is often used for soft costs related to hiring, R&D, and working capital necessary to support growth. Therefore, the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit plays an important role in leveraging both debt and equity. In combination, the two can support municipal tax bases and economic growth. CBI's portfolio businesses create significant exports out of state. This brings value to Maine and sells the Maine brand. Additionally, CEI's Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit has allowed us to import capital from out of state as well as raise it locally. Examples of some companies include Med Rhythms in Portland, which makes stroke rehabilitation device for patients learning to walk again. Pika Energy, a solar business that employed a significant number of UMaine engineering grads. Vetro, a company now with over 50 employees in Portland, making GIS software. And CourseStorm, a Bangor company which helps community education providers register students for courses. Thank you for your attention to this important economic development tool and for considering our testimony. Please don't hesitate to contact me with questions.
Thank you. And Sabrina, could you please bring Mr. Agnew over?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Senator Libby, Representative McDonald, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Government Oversight. My name is Tim Agnew of Portland. I first want to compliment OPEGA and the authors of the report on an in-depth and insightful analysis of the program. They have accurately reported the history of the program and identified potential improvements for FAME and the legislature to consider. By way of background, I was the chief executive officer of FAME when the program was first implemented back in 1988, and I have tracked its development and implementation over the life of the program. Since I left FAME in 1999, I've been active in venture capital investing, as well as serving as chair of the boards of both the Maine Technology Institute and the Maine Venture Fund. In each of those capacities, I have seen the key role the program plays in helping Maine early stage businesses raise the investment capital they need to grow. According to the legislative purpose language in the statute, the primary purpose of the program is, quote, to encourage the increased availability of risk equity capital to enterprises that have the potential for rapid growth and that bring capital into the state, unquote. The legislature noted at the time that Maine businesses have struggled to raise venture capital and that venture capital in Maine is, quote, substantially below the national average and the average of the other New England states. The changes to the program approved by the legislature in the last few years, venture capital investment in Maine has increased dramatically. If you look at the period from 2002 to 2011, the average annual venture capital investment per capita in Maine was only about 1/7 of the national average. In 2020, we had increased to 1/3 of the national average, moving up from 48th place to 42nd place. We've moved ahead of Vermont and we're just behind Rhode Island. New Hampshire once attracted 8.5 times Maine's venture capital per capita. In 2020, that number dropped to 1.6 times. The seed capital tax credit has helped put Maine on the map as a place where startup businesses can raise the venture capital they need to grow, and it is accomplishing its legislative purpose. The details regarding investor and company eligibility, the percentage of the tax credit, and the amount of credit available have been adjusted many times over the years. There's no magic formula that delivers the maximum amount of investment and job creation. The goal is to achieve the best balance of the amount of the credit and the definition of eligibility to attract investors to take the risk of investing in early stage money-losing Maine businesses that have the potential to grow good jobs and generate tax revenue. I look forward to continuing to work with the legislature to address that goal. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Agnew, for your testimony and for your service over many years to the people of Maine in various roles. I read your testimony earlier and was intrigued by your numbers and would really benefit, I think, from getting, you have a lot of relative numbers in there, but it would be really great if you could provide the actual numbers, the quantitative numbers themselves as to how venture capital has grown in Maine, what the numbers actually are, would be really helpful. Do you have those available that you could share with the committee?
I do. I have the numbers for 2020, which I used to compare to numbers that I had generated 10 years ago for a prior legislative meeting. They're different sources, so they're not a perfect comparison. And we also know that there is investment capital happening in Maine that doesn't show up in those numbers at all. But for purposes of comparing where we once were to where we are today and how we compare to other states in the region, I think they're at least indicative that we've come a long way. And I'd be happy to provide more information.
Yeah, that would be great. I appreciate that, Tim. And also, I imagine sourcing is a problem and some of the drawbacks because we don't know of all the investments being made. But I value your expertise in this area and would love to get into the granularity a little bit more. So thank you.
Seeing no other questions, it appears that the next 3, 4, maybe even 5 panelists are not available at this time. So if you'll give me a moment, I'm going to go through our list and see who is here. And Sabrina, I believe you have the list as well. If you could help me scan through the list of attendees, that would be appreciated. Chris Roney, would you please come over? Thank you, Mr. I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, Roney or Ronnie, whenever you're ready to proceed. And please do tell me how to pronounce your name properly.
Sure. Good morning. It's Chris Roney, R-O-N-E-Y. So Senator Libby, Representative McDonald, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Government Oversight. As I said, my name is Chris Roney. I'm the General Counsel at FAME. I live in Freeport, and I'm here to testify regarding the August 2021 report from OPEGA on evaluation of the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit Program. As you probably know, FAME has administered this program since its creation by Tim Agnew in 1988. And I've worked closely for many years on this program and with the businesses and investors that participate in this program and have observed many success stories, some of which Nat Henshaw listed. We believe and we have heard from businesses that the credit is an invaluable part of Maine's economic development offerings and that the program has meant a great, from these businesses has meant a great deal to their company's growth and success. We believe, and the OPEGA report observed that the credit has been associated with substantial private equity in Maine businesses over the years. Our overall reaction to the very thorough and thoughtful report is that improvements, to the program and data reporting requirements are welcome and needed. However, we should be mindful that in this process, with economic development incentives, it can be very difficult to attribute particular investment particular investments or business success directly to specific incentives versus the overall collective offering of various incentives, such as those offered by some of our partner organizations like the Department of Economic and Community Development, the Maine Technology Institute, and the Maine Venture Fund, all of which may collectively drive investor and business activities. Further, as we consider possible modifications to the program, we should bear in mind the desired precision of data and the results may impose additional burdens on the company's investors involved, as well as serve as potential disincentives for them to participate. In the interest of time, I've abbreviated my oral testimony today and hope you'll take the time to read my full written version that I've submitted. I'll make a couple of comments on the findings and conclusions of the report and also address the recommendations, and then I'll certainly be available to answer any questions. As to the findings and conclusions regarding the data deficiencies, I would start by acknowledging that FAME could and should have done a better job on data collection and reporting. The OPEGA review has brought this issue squarely to our attention, and we intend to address these deficiencies immediately. While we've been soliciting the statutorily required information from participating businesses over the years, the review makes clear that improvement is needed regarding several aspects of this process. We certainly regret those shortcomings and assure you that they were not intentional. The truth is that the program has grown in size and complexity over the 36 years we've administered it, and our focus has largely been on implementation without necessarily adding the resources to data collection and reporting. We are currently developing plans to improve the reporting requirements and collection, as well as increase our staff resources to better meet the needs of the program. We have already revised our annual reporting form that we send to businesses to collect data to include the data points that the taxation committee and the most recent law added last year when they increased the credits. And we've also taken the opportunity to add other data collection points and definitions to address the clarity of the report form and reduce inconsistent responses and obtain much more detailed information. We intend to do more compliance outreach in addition to ceasing new credit awards for non-compliant companies, but we of course welcome any other suggestions on these points you or the taxation committee may have. Regarding the conclusions about the potential mismatch between goals and program design, FAME recognizes that the program design falls entirely within the purview of the legislature. However, we would make a few observations based on our experience with the program and our economic development experience as well. First, I would state that direct jobs of the participating companies, while very important, is only one economic factor that is impacted by the investment driven by this program. Additional economic benefits are derived from indirect and induced jobs, the so-called multiplier effect, which is not addressed in the report, and by business spending on other items such as payroll, rent, materials, and other supplies, as well as taxes of all kinds in the course of its operations. Hopefully, some of these additional data points we have started collecting will make the economic benefits more clear. However, we wish to urge that the credit should not be contingent on business outcomes, and because that would make the credit unreliable to investors and would severely limit its impact. The second point I would make is that this program plays an important role in stimulating private investment by offsetting the risk of the investor, but it is part of a larger economic development suite of incentives. It is likely impossible to determine if investments from any source would be made without credits, as there are likely many factors that together convince an investor to invest and not any one factor alone. Similarly, there are many factors that help a business attract investment and achieve economic success, and it is likely impossible to determine if certain achievements would or would not have occurred without the specific investments that resulted in the tax credit. As Mr. Henshaw correctly noted, equity investments are catalytic. They result in other equity investments and loans and other capital coming into that company. My third point would be that the report talked about the fact that founders of the company may end up participating. And I would say that there is room certainly to adjust the maximum percentages that qualifying investors own to still be qualified. But our rules have always focused on the important level of control that particular investors may have, not necessarily their arbitrary amount of ownership. So anybody who, for example, is in senior management and is an owner of a company is not eligible for the tax credit, regardless of how high or low their percentage of ownership is. So we believe that's a better model for measuring, whether an investor has too much control over a company and therefore could protect its investment, rather than the purpose of this program, which is stimulating more passive investment for people who don't have any control over the business. On the issue of attracting venture capital, I can say that the program has done an exceptional job over the last several years attracting investments from out-of-state investments from regional, national, and even international venture capital sources. Over the last 3 years alone, we've attracted somewhere between $20 and $25 million worth of venture capital into the state. As you may have heard, the legislature added these credits a few years ago in an effort to attract what's called in the industry smart money, which is money that comes with the business experience, the funding connections, and other resources that venture capital funds bring that aren't necessarily brought by other investors. And it's been very, very successful. As to the types of eligible businesses, we defer to the legislature in terms of determining what businesses are sought to be assisted with this program. But we do note that I've seen many success stories in all categories, and so it really would be a choice between whatever the legislature thought was the most appropriate to help. Finally, I'll address the report's recommendations, and I would say FAME supports the recommendations and looks forward to collaborating with the legislature, DCD, and other stakeholders to assist in this process and improve the program. FAME believes it'll be very important in that process to ensure that there is not an overemphasis on jobs as a measurement of success to the exclusion of other benefits, and that the credits not be contingent on outcomes that are not within the control of the investor. We also look forward to working with the parties to determine the appropriate scope of required reporting. We want to caution against reporting levels that might overburden participants and possibly discourage program participation, but we recognize that and we take our role as administrator of the program extremely seriously and pledge to make improvements in our process for obtaining, reviewing, and delivering data on the program. And we welcome your suggestions for improvement. Thank you for consideration of our comments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your time today. And Mr. Burns, you may start when you are ready.
Good morning, members of the committee. I apologize. I'm not in a position where I can put my camera on, so you'll have to bear with audio only. And I'm not going to read my testimony again, not in a place where I can spend the time to do that, but you have my testimony in front of you. I'm happy to answer questions. Just by way of introduction, I served as the managing director of the Maine Venture Fund, statutorily known as the Small Enterprise Growth Fund, for 21 years until my semi-retirement in June. Joe Powers is now the managing director of Maine Venture Fund. I've obviously had a long experience working alongside individuals and funds that have utilized the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit over the many years. Obviously, Maine Venture Fund, as a state-sponsored venture fund, does not use the credit. We're not a tax-paying entity, obviously. But the tax credit is, it's a tool to entice investment from private capital, and that's incredibly important for a state like Maine, which remains off the beaten path for venture capital. If you look at the national venture capital statistics, 60, 70, 80% of venture capital goes to several markets throughout the United States. As you know, Silicon Valley, New York, Austin, Boston, and several others. The irony is that we're hours away, in some cases maybe just an hour away from one of those largest venture capital markets. But investing in companies in Maine is not really on the radar of most large private venture capital funds. So that, the trick over the years is how to get private capital interested in scalable companies in Maine to help grow our economy. There are a number of things, obviously, that Maine has done over the years to do this, including the Maine Technology Institute to seed very early stage investments in high growth companies, creating the Maine Venture Fund to directly invest private equity capital in growth companies in Maine, and the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit to entice investors to take a second look at investing in Maine, and to sort of be that the fulcrum point to tip the balance in favor of them putting their private capital into a Maine-based company. So it's an important tool. There's obviously more data, more analysis is always helpful. Many states have tax credit programs. I think it's important to keep good data and good metrics, but it's also very hard to do that. It's hard to get into an investor's mind and know if that one aspect was the thing that tipped his or her mind into making that investment in a Maine-based company. So, they have choices. They're looking at many companies. There are many factors that go into making that decision to invest in a Maine-based company. And the tax credit is one more thing that makes that investment more attractive. I think at this point, probably best for me to just take any questions if there are any. I'm happy to answer any questions. Like I said, I've worked 21 years in this fund. I've worked alongside the Maine Angels, other high net worth individuals who are not part of the Maine Angels organization, private venture capitalists around the country who have looked at, and in some cases, chosen to invest in a Maine-based company. So lots of experience working with the credit. I will say, as I did in my testimony, that one of the tangible things I think we can look at as a very positive of the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit is an extremely robust angel membership organization in Maine. So the Maine Angels was created in 2003. Actually, a couple of Maine Venture Fund board members helped to start the Maine Angels back then. And that organization has grown well over many years, thanks to good management, and thanks in part to the attractiveness of the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit for those investors in that group. The Maine Angels has been one of the most active angel groups in the nation and is a very active member of the National Angel Capital Association, which the Maine Venture Fund also belongs to. So anyway, I'll leave my comments there and invite any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony today. And I will move on to Ms. Foy whenever you are ready to begin.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Before I start, Senator DeChambeau, congratulations on your induction to the Franco-American Hall of Fame yesterday. Saw lots of social media posts about that last night, so congratulations. Senator Libby, Representative McDonald, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Government Oversight. My name is Kate Foy. I'm the legislative liaison for the Department of Economic and Community Development. I'm here today to offer comment on the OPEGA report of the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit Program. As discussed in multiple places in OPEGA's report, the Seed Capital Tax Credit Program is one key part of a portfolio of policies that aim to bolster entrepreneurship in Maine. When helping an entrepreneur seeking investment for an expanding business, DECD staff may recommend the Seed Capital Tax Credit Program, as well as the Maine Technology Institute programming, tax incentives like the Pine Tree Development Zone program, or in-kind support from organizations like the Maine International Trade Center and the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. It is not unusual to see a promising new business involved with half a dozen state-backed programs, each of which provides necessary support without which development may not get off the ground. In that portfolio of programs, the Seed Capital Tax Credit is an incomparable incentive for businesses that require outside equity investment. Certain businesses require this type of funding to be viable. Traditional financing may be too small or too stringent. The economies that have succeeded the most in recent decades have had a large amounts of equity investment available to boost promising, innovative businesses, particularly in the tech sector. Maine does not lack the ideas or entrepreneurial spirit to support this type of growth, but it does not have the financial weight to attract the required capital adjusted for the size of our economy. We get 2/3 as much venture capital investment as New Hampshire and 1/18 of that of Massachusetts. The Seed Capital Tax Credit is specifically targeted to counter this program and give our entrepreneurs more access to the types of financing found in other states. Its uniqueness and inseparability from other programs makes it challenging to cleanly evaluate the Seed Capital Tax Credit Program. As OPEGA noted, of the 29 businesses that received investment through the program in 2016, 21 of them also received MTI or Maine Venture Fund funding, may also have participated in other programs like Pine Tree Development Zones. Some participants may only require the help of one program to launch their business, while others depend on multiple. Considering the effectiveness of the Seed Capital Tax Credit, therefore requires the context of the portfolio of programs designed to enhance investment in the state. No single program on its own matches the full needs of entrepreneurs in Maine, but each fills a necessary role in the ecosystem. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I'll be here for the work session and also happy to answer as many questions as I can, but I also see my colleague Brian Whitney is here and also will be testifying.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Ms. Foy. Appreciate your coming before us today. Again, as you may have heard my questions to Mr. Agnew, I'd really like to dig into the actual numbers, and some of your numbers that you gave were comparable, or they're comparative, I should say. And I'd like to look at the overall, you try to understand the overall quantum of investment, particularly from venture capital firms in Maine, and how that's changed over the years. So if you could provide some of that background to the numbers you cited in your testimony, that would be really terrific for me.
I certainly can look into that, Senator Bennett, and get those to you. I also wonder if some of those numbers should come from FAME, because they administer the program themselves. DECD doesn't administer the program. So I wonder if that information we could get from FAME for the committee. I don't know that it's something we have.
Okay, I didn't ask the question, Mr. Roney, because he didn't actually cite the numbers, but wherever your sourcing is, if it's
sure,
that would
we
be
all
great.
work together. So
yeah,
So
I'm aware of that, and also I'm aware that the numbers are. I just like to also understand the sourcing for it, because there's a lot we don't know in this area, and it would be interesting for me to know what we do know in this area, right? And I think that would really inform us all as policymakers better if we can sort of analyze that. One of the recommendations of the report was better data, but rather than better data just on the companies, I'm actually more interested in better data on the investing that's going on, because I do think this is the purpose of this. I agree with Mr. Agnew that this is the purpose of this program, and some of the, as indicated in the report, some of the other proposed purposes are a little bit tangential in my view. So I'd like to focus on, business creation and the investment. Those two pieces are the most important for me. And I just say that for anybody providing information to the committee, that's really what I'd like to say. So thank you.
It's a great question. And I will work on with sort of the team get that information back to all of you. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Foy? Senator Bennett, I did bring Mr. Roney back into the meeting if you would like to direct your question to him. I know it's a little bit out of order, but.
Wonderful if it's with the committee's indulgence. Mr. Roney, I don't know if you've been hearing my questions I posed earlier to Mr. Agnew and then now to Ms. Foy, but I would, any data you have about the level of venture capital that's happening in Maine, I know that would be useful. I know some of it flows through the seed capital tax credit, but not all of it. And just trying to draw a bead on how much this is used and how stimulating actually it is for those two critical purposes, which is business success. And then secondly, the investment levels, which were, as Mr. Agnew noted, one of the primary purposes of as written into statute of this program, was to improve Maine's take, if you will, of that kind of investment. So any data you have like that, and I know it's imperfect, would be really useful.
But thank you for your question, Senator Bennett. We'll certainly work. I have the numbers for obviously the venture capital that's come through the program. It'll be a little bit more challenging to get the more global, inside Maine numbers. And Tim did the research in terms of comparing them with other states. But we'll work together and get you some additional information. Yeah,
thank you. I know that some extrapolation and assumptions will need to be made, but that would be just. Information's imperfect, but understanding what we have is good. Thank you.
Right.
All right, moving on. If there are no other questions, Mr. Whitney, you may begin when you are ready.
Great, thank you. Senator Libby, Representative McDonald, and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Brian Whitney, and I'm the president of the Maine Technology Institute. I've submitted some written testimony, so I won't read all my remarks this morning. But like Nat and Chris and Tim, I want to commend the OPEGA staff for their thorough evaluation of the program and for conducting outreach to understand the perspectives of the various stakeholders as part of the review. I was pleased and honored that the OPEGA staff reached out to me back in January 2021 to gain a better understanding of MTI, how it fits within the ecosystem of supports for Maine startups, and to share thoughts and perspectives on the Seed Capital Tax Credit Program. The conclusions and recommendations in the evaluation are thoughtful, and they serve as strong guideposts for effective stewardship of public funds. And certainly, while tightening up the reporting mechanisms and more clearly defining outcomes as merited, it's vital that we recognize that the Seed Capital Tax Credit Program is an essential tool for helping businesses to scale their operations here in Maine. The companies that MTI works with daily to help grow and scale jobs and revenues are incredibly risky ventures during their formative years. That makes it tough to attract the type of capital they need to get to the next level. The Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit Program helps to mitigate some of the risk of investing in these ventures by providing at least a partial return on the investment, even if the business ultimately fails. It's interesting to note that of the 95 unique companies on the list of FAME approved accounts for the Seed Capital Tax Credit Program, 70 or 73% of them received early support from MTI. So most of the companies participating in the program have endured the MTI gauntlet of review and evaluation scrutiny by our subject matter experts, and with sufficient levels of follow-on investment, are uniquely suited to grow and scale. Of the 25 that weren't in the MTI family, 18 or 72% were not in MTI approved sectors. They were generally hospitality businesses, which may lead to a policy discussion around the fourth conclusion in the OPEGA report. Again, I commend OPEGA for its evaluation of the program and will reiterate that while improvements can certainly be made, the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit Program is one of the most effective tools Maine has to spur investments in startups that are well-positioned for growth and job creation. And Senator Bennett, I know that you know this, but it's difficult to get a good handle on venture capital invested in the state. There's a couple of reports that kind of track that. And just to illustrate how difficult it is to track those numbers, Money Tree, for example, issued a report that said venture capital investments in Maine were about 18 million in 2020, while another report called the Venture Monitor noted that Maine companies received 86 million in venture capital in 2020. And I think it goes without saying that despite the disparity between those two reports, it is clearly evident that there's a scarcity of venture capital investment in our state, and we need to do whatever we can to help spur that. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you for your testimony today. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Mr. Capron, whenever you are ready to begin.
Are you waiting for me?
The floor is yours.
I want the ceiling. Ken Capron with a startup called Microrail, and I am really glad to see when OPEGA does reports on anything involving economic development in Maine. So I thank them for this report. It highlights some of the issues that I think have been around for a long time, and that is the goals that are stated are hard to prove without additional facts. But that's not the reason I wanted to speak. I wanted to speak because I think the issue this brings to light, it goes back many years to how does a new company looking to seek investment in or to get help from the state on investing in a project, how do you find out about all the resources that are available? And I've been at this for 2 years, and this is, if it weren't for the OPEGA report, I wouldn't have known about this particular fund. And so I'm delighted that there's another opportunity to ask and beg for money. But what I'm finding is that for every potential source, you have to fill out a whole set of forms. It's the same information over and over and over. And for the most part, and I may be wrong in some cases, but for the most part, most of the report isn't looked at by the people who are going to loan money. Most of the decision, I think, is based on a few key factors, like the team that is involved and who's going to guarantee the loans or whatever. But so I'm here speaking out about some way to coordinate through a central no wrong door approach. How do you let potential startups know that these seed funds or seed economic development funds are available? So that's my concern, and I think that goes back to a broader issue that I think maybe GOC has dealt with before. I know it was there during the as an issue before Paul LePage came along, so it's been around a long time. But I think that's one of the biggest problems with all of these types of funds is how do you find out what is even available? I mean, if I go to MTI, I'd like to see a sign on the door that says this way to this fund and this way to this fund. And, so co-locating all of these various funds would be really helpful. But otherwise, it's a very confusing path through the woods to figure out funding mechanisms when, in fact, I really should be paying attention to the project and not how to fund it. That's just my opinion. Appreciate what OPEGA does, appreciate the terrific group of people on the GOC this year, and look forward to future support.
Thank you for your testimony today. Are there any questions from the committee? Are there any other attendees here today who wish to testify? If so, please use the raise your hand function in Zoom now. Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. Is the committee prepared to move into work session? I'm seeing yes, no, maybe.
I think the committee is.
Okay. Today's meeting has a work session on the OPEGA report on evaluation of the Maine seed tax credit. The purpose of a work session is for members of the committee to discuss the Maine seed tax credit and determine any further actions. Work sessions are generally reserved for discussion and participation by committee members. However, at times, with permission of the chair, the committee may invite an outside individual to answer questions of the committee. Do we have a motion on any further actions on the OPEGA report on evaluation of the Maine seed tax credit? Senator Libby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the GOC endorse the report.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Representative Holly Stover. Any discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Senator Bennett.
Thank you. Could we ask Ms. Nixon to explain again what exactly the endorsement of the report means? I mean, I support the report. I admire it, but there are some conclusions that I might disagree with.
Sure. As part of the process and procedure for receiving OPEGA reports, the committee takes this vote on endorsement. And what it means is that you find the report to be complete with regard to what was assigned to be done, that the results are credible, objective, and relevant, and that any recommendations contained in the report are reasonable and appropriate for the issues identified.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Senator Bennett, I think at the last meeting I talked about endorsing a review of the citizen initiative process, and at the time noted that the legislator, just by way of example, I may oppose the citizen initiative process as a policy, but I may still vote to endorse the report because I found the OPEGA work to be credible and valid. So we're trying to take an action that endorses the analysis process that OPEGA conducted. And when we get to the House and Senate floor, that's where we can exercise our opinions and views on the policy matters before us. I hope that helps separate the two ideas.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, both chairs and Ms. Nixon, for reminding us all about that, and particularly me. Yeah, I'm prepared to endorse the report, and there are some policy conclusions that I think I would take some minor issue with respect to, particularly some of the proposals relating to the sorts of businesses that should be prioritized under OPEGA, under the seed capital tax credit, but those are kind of incidental and minor. I think the report itself is fine work. I agree with all the people who testified on that basis, and I think it will be informative for future policy making, which I think we should try to endorse as well, so that we can have a debate about some of the drift, I think, that has maybe occurred with the purposes of the seed capital tax credit, and would like to see it tightened up. Thank you.
Representative Millett. You are unmuted now.
I'm having trouble with my screen, but I was wanting to see how the committee feels about the 3 recommended actions, both legislative and management, that were contained in the PowerPoint. I support endorsing the report. I think there's a lot of good recommendations here, and I'm wondering just what kind of legislative and internal management follow through would be expected by the motion, and how clearly we need to advise the OPEGA staff in that regard.
Senator Libby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The motion before us, the endorsement vote, is one of a series of actions we could take today. We can, after this motion, we could consider introducing legislation to the Taxation Committee. We could, not option number 1, option number 2, we could talk with the Taxation Committee about introducing a bill for them to vet. We could respond in writing as a committee to FAME management, outlining our findings, making specific asks for how they administer the program, those kinds of things. So those are a few options that I think we have before us. I know that Christopher Roney indicated they're largely in agreement with the findings on the management administration side, and that they are working on implementing the changes. Clearly, there are some deficiencies there, especially in terms of data gathering and reporting. So those are a few options, I think, for us to consider on how we address the management side of this report.
Madam Chair, could I respond to that?
Yes, certainly.
I wonder if Senator Libby, working with Lucia and you as co-chair might put his comments in writing and use them as an action for further endorsement of the report that might be on our October agenda. I like what I heard the Senate chair speak to, and I just want to make sure we have an action plan as a follow-up to report endorsement.
And Director Nixon.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to note sort of process-wise where we're at. So there's two, it's a little confusing when we have OPEGA reports because there's really two votes potentially to happen. One is the one that the motion's on the floor, which is purely endorsement of the work product as just described to Senator Bennett and discussed by Senator Libby. And then the other piece, which is a separate vote, is really what you might be more familiar in a traditional legislative committee meeting where you discuss and digest information and then take a vote on follow-up actions, legislative, whether the committee sends a letter as Senator Libby described, or the committee drafts legislation, or the committee refers something to another legislative committee. So there are really these two separate things, the endorsement of the work product, which is a statutory requirement for OPEGA, and then the committee's deliberations about the substance of the report and the recommendations and whether you want to take the further action. And as Representative Millett mentioned, there are at the end, I don't know how many of you have your report right there with you, but just between pages 25 and 29 is where OPEGA listed those three specific recommendations that Representative Millett was bringing attention to. One, and I'm happy to review those now or bring them back to a future meeting for your deliberation, but those were presented, as he noted, in the PowerPoint at the last meeting. They're found on pages 25 through 29. Two of them are recommendations for legislative action, and one is a recommendation for management action by FAME.
Thank you, Director Nixon. So would it be appropriate to go ahead and vote on whether or not to endorse the report, and then as a separate discussion, discuss and vote on the follow-up? So I would encourage the committee to go ahead. We have a motion on the floor to endorse the report with a second. If we wanted to proceed and finalize that vote, then we could go on to continue discussing the follow-up from the committee. Does that make sense for everyone? All right, so Sabrina, if you'd like to call the roll call on the endorsement.
All right, we'll start with Senator Libby.
Yes.
Senator Bailey.
Yes.
Senator Bennett.
Yes.
Senator DeChambeau.
Yes.
Senator Kime.
Yes.
Senator Timberlake. Absent. Representative McDonald.
Yes.
Representative Arata.
Yes.
Representative Bleier.
Yes.
Representative Millett.
Yes.
Representative O'Neill. Absent. Representative Stover.
Yes.
10 yes, 2 absent.
Thank you. And now would we like to continue our discussion on follow-up action? Senator DeChambeau.
Yes, thank you. And again, I want to thank Representative Millett for bringing that up. He made reference to the PowerPoint, which is the easy one to read. I didn't mean that, Solwyn, that you got the easy one, but I want to thank Lucia to cross-reference that with the pages, has more information. And I think that's a good question to to ponder as far as those recommendations. One of them was data. And the general counsel for FAME, I think Chris Rooney, did mention that he admitted that they're not doing a good job on data and that he would work on that, you know, resolving that deficiency. I take him at his word, but I think I've been in the Senate long enough when people say that, unless it's a statute or in the statute that they will provide data, that's an easy one to work on so that we would have it. So if we look at those recommendations, and they're very well mapped out, the design, the data, the goals, I think we can, I don't know if this is the area or a subcommittee would look at recommended legislation. I'm unsure of what our role would be. But so I just want to mention that, but that's one place that is very easy to fix, is that deficiency on data collection.
Senator Libby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe we can talk about the management oversight piece first, and then we can talk about policy changes in a bill second. So for a suggestion, the GOC could write to FAME asking for their action plan to each of the three recommendations that OPEGA outlined in their report on page 28, 29. Those three items, for members who may not have the report handy, a number of administrative changes around data collection, number one. Number two, administrative changes around data analysis. And number three, administrative changes and really complying with annual reporting requirements in statute. Those are the three main categories, and we could ask for FAME to provide us a response on their action plans, give them a period of time to provide that response and indicate, you know, how they can achieve it within existing resources. I think that's one concrete action we can take. They've indicated they're willing to do it. I think to Senator DeChambeau's point, we're putting it in writing and asking for a detailed response and an implementation plan. So I think that might accomplish one of the goals we're seeking.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you. Always appreciate Senator Libby's clarity and his thoughtfulness in his approach. I would endorse that approach as he articulated well. And then on the secondary question of legislative, I think I'd want to wait to look at more data regarding the some of the underlying purposes that I was getting at, my questions of the seed capital tax credit, as well as learning more from FAME about that implementation plan before taking up consideration of potential legislative options that we might have. I think getting the answer to the questions that Senator Libby put forward would be really a great first step. Thank you.
Senator Keim.
I'm wondering if we're sending a letter to FAME with those bullet points, if we would also ask them to talk about the purpose of this credit, as sort of was included in the recommendation on page 26, which would just say that the legislature, in consultation with FAME and other stakeholders, clearly define program goals. I wonder if we're going to send a letter to FAME, if we should also ask them to begin that discussion as well, to suggest to us how they would see that we tighten up the program goals.
Director Nixon.
I was just saying, I'll just read that in case not everyone has it handy. So OPEGA's recommendation on page 26 had been a recommendation in the legislature, as Senator Kime noted, in consultation with FAME, DECD, and other stakeholders, reevaluate and clearly define program goals and what success looks like in terms of outcomes. And then that would provide, and so I think what I heard Senator Kime saying is the first one step in that would be asking FAME for their input to feed into that discussion.
Senator Libby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've only heard a few committee members talk, but on this question of what we do in terms of policy changes, a lot of decisions have to be made if we're going to make adjustments to this tax credit, and I think we're likely to have divergent views on this committee. There have been occasions where there have been occasions where the GOC drafts and introduces legislation to a policy committee as a follow-up to one of our research and analysis projects. This credit, though, given the time that taxation committee spent on it in the last session and the sort of breadth and depth of the policy questions at issue, I wonder, given our limited staff resources, especially in light of the work we tasked them with at our last meeting, Child Protective Services work on a very truncated timeline, a timeline that's going to be challenging for folks to meet. I wonder if we punt this one to the tax committee and maybe work with the chairs and the leads of tax to have a bill introduced and maybe follow along in their process, provide the data we've collected and the answers to questions we've sought, but sort of punt the policy piece to the tax committee. Wondering what folks think of that.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would consider that personally as a possibility, but I would prefer to get answers to the questions that we lay out first. So that would be where I would come on that. I don't particularly, and by the way, I also subscribe thoroughly to the notion that we do have some other more pressing matters before us, and so I don't mind tabling legislative recommendations for action pending receipt of more information and the workload of the committee and the priorities of the committee. So I don't see a great need to act in an expeditious fashion on this one. Thank you.
And Director Nixon, can you just provide us a brief overview of the questions, the information that the committee is seeking or considering seeking?
Sure. So what I've heard so far during the work session, so there's two parts. One is there's a series of questions that Senator Bennett asked from some of the folks who testified this morning. And so those, we've made note of it, they've made note of it, and we'll be seeing what we can get and bring back on those questions. And then the other piece was during the work session, Senator Libby proposed consideration of drafting a letter to FAME to ask, request that they provide information on their action plan and implementation strategy for the recommendation that for management action that OPEGA outlines on page 28 and 29 of the report around processes for data collection, analysis, and reporting. So I think it would be requesting that FAME report back to the GOC with their information on that. And then from the public hearing, following up on the questions that Senator Bennett asked and any other questions that were asked from the public hearing and getting those sent into the committee as well. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you. So I would be in support of gathering more information here in government oversight and then passing that information along to tax. Senator Bennett.
Thank you. Would that also be inclusive of Senator Kimes' recommendation, sort of implicitly, because one of the recommendations of the report was to engage FAME in their thoughts? Would that also be included? Because I thought that was a good idea.
Is that question to Director Nixon?
Happy to take a stab.
Senator Libby.
Thank you. I hope I'm not talking too much. However, the committee has said sometimes I offer helpful comments, so always in that vein. It's not a ego thing. So I'm wondering, this is a bit of a teaser for later in the agenda, but chairs and staff were talking about perhaps skipping the October GOC meeting to allow time for staff to catch up with work projects and for us to have enough on the agenda to make that time useful for us. So that would put our November meeting as the second Wednesday in November. It's roughly a 60-day period where we could try to get FAME to give us their action plan in that time period. Sounds like we're going to maybe pause on some policy discussion for a bit. And so it's whatever the committee wants to do, but I'm sort of seeing this policy discussion taking up a bigger space, more time carrying through into January, February, March. And getting FAME's perspective on these policy tweaks probably is going to be a back and forth with DECD, stakeholders, and the legislature. So we could either ask those policy questions, their opinion of the policy questions now, or wait for that conversation to develop later in the year.
Senator Khan.
So I appreciate the fact that we will likely be sending this, to the policy committee, and they will be taking up whatever legislative changes and the debate around that. I'm just wondering if, since we're talking about pushing it out further, for FAME to be giving a little more information ahead of time, so that consideration is part of the whole, I think might be helpful to the policy committee, because it's a short session coming up. And if they're going to undertake, I guess I'm understanding you, Senator Libby, as saying that they might undertake some policy considerations in the next session, starting in January.
Representative McDonald.
Yes, please proceed.
I think FAME is still in the attendee room, so we could ask Chris Roney to come back and help with this part of the discussion. Another thought is, FAME will often say to the policy committee, on a question, they'll say, well, that's a policy decision of the legislature. They might respond with a proposal. They might give their opinion on a proposal, but they might also just defer. So rather than speak for Mr. Roney, he's in the room. He could certainly speak for himself and the agency.
You're doing a very good job, Senator Libby. So I don't want to get in the way of progress. So thank you for having me back. A couple of thoughts. I mean, we're certainly more than willing to to respond to a request for an action plan. Sorry, am I still here?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, my screen went blank, so apologize. So happy to respond, to a request for an action plan on the management items. That's duly noted, and we're happy to do that. On and I do agree with the idea of having the policy debates perhaps at the taxation committee, because they have both in terms of the policy around what the goals are, but also around what's the adequate level of reporting to to try to demonstrate those goals. because they did add a bunch of reporting requirements that we've just now implemented because that was part of the new law. And so, trying to integrate whatever new requirements we want to talk about into the ones that we've just implemented will be kind of an important give and take discussion, I think, with them. Obviously, welcome. If this committee wants to do that, that's fine too. But it does. We would be happy to give our comments on all of those. In terms of what the value of what we think we can achieve in terms of getting reporting. I don't know. Obviously, we have opinions about whether particular business enterprises ought to be included or not, but I don't know that I really do believe that that's largely a better discussion for the legislature to debate, because things like film or exporting businesses, have are important to different constituencies, and I don't know if that's helpful.
All right. Any further discussion? I would entertain a motion. Don't everybody speak at once. Senator Bennett.
So if I recall, we were at the question of, as Senator Libby put it, there are two possible options, one or two avenues. One is management oversight. Second is policy legislative. And I would recommend, or I'd make a motion for the purpose of discussion and moving forward to adopt what Lucia Nixon summarizes as Senator Libby's questions to FAME, along with what she said about getting data supporting the lines of inquiry I had. And then I think we should defer. And I think in that letter, I would say we could welcome FAME's thoughts about the other parts of the report. And so we could invite them to comment, understanding that that would be an invitation and not a requirement or an expectation necessarily, depending on because they may want, as Senator Libby said, to talk with other stakeholders and whatnot. But I think starting that conversation, if they wish, would be useful. And then just defer on the legislative until we come back again and see what we have. I know that's not a nice and clean motion, but there it is.
And I do want to be sure, did we capture Senator Keim and Senator DeChambeau's comments in that motion? And perhaps Director Nixon could give us a summary, because that is a very long motion.
I'll give it a whirl. So what I see coming out of that is action, and we may need some tweaking after I pull this together verbally, but the motion would be for the Government Oversight Committee to send a letter to the Finance Authority of Maine to request that they follow up and provide the Government Oversight Committee with an action plan to address the recommended management actions described in the OPEGA report on pages 28 and 29 related to data collection, analysis, and reporting. Also, the letter would also include invite, pursuant to what Senator Bennett just said, would be to invite or welcome FAME to provide comments on defining program goals and what success looks like in terms of program outcomes, to provide background for future legislative policy discussions, and also not included necessarily in the letter, well, in the letter to the extent it applies to FAME, to follow up on the request for data and information that Senator Bennett made during the public hearing. And I would just note as an aside that we would also follow up with the other folks to whom he asked questions for information. I might have missed if there was something different from Senator DeChambeau, but I think that covers it, but please correct me if I missed something.
Thank you, Director Nixon. And do we have a second for that motion? Representative Millet. Seconds. Any further discussion?
I would second the intent of Senator Bennett's motion as clarified and focused by Director Nixon.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Libby.
I had suggested a response back to us by our November meeting, which would be a 60-day period. I'm seeing Mr. Roney nod his head. That's reasonable. So that would also be included in the request. Okay.
Senator Bennett, since you made the motion, is that agreeable to you?
Yes, friendly, always friendly.
I think that's a great motion. Well done.
All right, seeing no further discussion, Sabrina, could you please call the roll?
All right. Senator Libby,
Yes.
Senator Bailey,
Yes.
Senator Bennett,
Yes.
Senator DeChambeau,
Oops. Yes. Thank you.
Senator Khan,
Yes.
Senator Timberlake, absent. Representative McDonald,
Yes.
Representative Arata,
Yes.
Representative Bleier,
Yes.
Representative Millet,
Yes.
Representative O'Neill, absent. Representative Stover,
Yes.
10 yes, 2 absent.
Thank you. And so concludes our work session. Thank you, everyone who participated in the public hearing portion and also in the work session. We appreciate you being here today. And now I'm going to turn the rest of this meeting over to my esteemed colleague and co-chair, Senator Nate Libby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll direct the committee to agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4, it's our quarterly report back from the Maine Commission on Indigent Legal Services. We have Justin Andrus, who's now officially the permanent executive director of the commission. Congratulations, Mr. Andrus, and welcome. We also have Ellie Maciag, deputy director of the Maine Commission on Indigent Legal Services. So in the mailed packet that you received behind tab 4, you have a printed report from Mr. Andrus. Just wanted to note that for committee. Good to see you again, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. I've learned to check to make sure I'm broadcasting successfully. Am I? Good, thank you. So the last quarter at MCILS has largely seen us working to implement the plans that we had made and then running into some roadblocks. Some of them have been cleared up since the letter I sent last week. For example, we were able to post the 6 positions that we had been granted supplemental budget last Friday. And so that hiring process is now underway. That's been the biggest obstacle to making progress on the auditing and oversight front, because we still haven't had the people to do that work. So we're looking forward to doing that. We're getting a lot of inquiries outside of the process, asking for details about what the jobs might have, redirecting them into the process, but it suggests that there is a lot of interest and we should have some good candidates. The openings will be for 30 days. So I anticipate that we will begin the hiring process in October, the actual onboarding process, and hopefully we'll have people installed and ready to go by November 1st. So that's the time frame that I think is realistic. I'm trying to learn to readjust my private world expectations for the way state change happens. So we are going as quickly as we can. through that process. Otherwise, I've given a lot of data when we did this last, and I asked whether you wanted a review of what I'd written. Suggested that that was unnecessary. So I'm happy to address anything in particular that you'd like me to, but I don't want to bore you by just rattling off what I've already put in writing for you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrus. Committee members may have questions, but 2 items I was hoping you could summarize for us for the benefit of the public and others listening. Number 1, your budget situation. Number 2, your caseload. That'd be two points to start. Just a brief summary of your report.
So our budget is healthy at the moment, which is excellent. We received adequate funding, improved funding beyond adequate in the supplemental budget. We also received $4 million in COVID relief funds to address the case surge issue that we're seeing. So for the moment, we appear to be in relatively good shape. We have very limited carry forwards in terms of encumbrances from last year. That money is accounted for. And we now understand that the money that was carried forward from the fiscal year 20 budget is available to us. We do need to go through a budget order process. But it looks like we should not have difficulty meeting our financial obligations in this year. And as I've thought about more, I did say in my letter, I thought it was possible we could have an issue for next year. But I think given the way the surge in cases is going now, it looks like that's unlikely to be a problem. So I think that's excellent. Historically, MCILS has run into the red and then caught up. And this is a much more tenable position to be in. The caseload issue is a fairly significant issue. We're seeing a huge surge in the number of cases MCILS is being asked to provide lawyers for, while at the same time our lawyers are continuing to express some dismay about the change in the practice environment. I provided, for the benefit of those who don't get the reports, and I provided the committee with the responses to the survey that we did in August, and attorney responses were fairly consistent. There are still some people who are unhappy with me or with MCILS. We're working on that stuff. But there are a lot of people talking about the difficulty in returning to a pure, primarily in-person practice regime. So I've been trying to communicate with the judicial branch about making the practice environment work for attorneys, particularly those who have to travel from county to county in an effort to keep as many people as possible on board. We're seeing a massive surge in the number of new filings. I think in the letter I explained that we had a historical average of about 26,000 cases a year in the 5 years before the pandemic. We were up to 28,000 in fiscal year 21, and we're on track for something more like 31 to 33,000 cases in fiscal year 22. So it is a massive surge against a declining number of attorneys participating. So that's problematic. We're doing what we can to try and foster a practice environment that's going to work for people and have people not disengage. We do appear to have lost, well, let me just try that again. We do appear to have eliminated the people who were frustrated by the rules. There were some people who left earlier in the year for that. And, you know, if they'd like to come back and follow the rules, I hope they'll do that. We also do seem to have fewer people concerned about the rate. So the increase in rate of compensation appears to have stemmed the tide in terms of those people. The people who are leaving now frequently saying they're going to come back. They're not leaving our program. They simply can't accept new cases because their workload is too high. And that's a function of the actual caseload being high and having moved from Zoom, where people were able to be in several courts in an afternoon or a morning, to being on the road. So I've really been pursuing the judiciary about Zoom, making it possible for lawyers to appear remotely, especially in the outlying counties from where the core of our lawyers are. Yesterday, I got a request from a judge for information about our lawyer count in Washington County, I think. And there were a total of 4 attorneys in Washington County doing Washington County cases. 2 of those will only do lawyer of the day. The judge had expressed concerns about how Zoom works from the court's perspective, but there's no way you can get an attorney to Machias from somewhere else unless that attorney is able to appear remotely. So that's the dialogue, and it's not really a negotiation. We don't have any power to negotiate from, but that's the dialogue that's going on with the judiciary to try and address that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I appreciate that summary. Other questions from the committee? Senator Khan.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Mr. Anderson. Congratulations, and thank you for taking on the role permanently. We appreciate that so much. I did notice a lot of the comments from the lawyers had to do with Zoom and e-filing, and I'm recognizing also, that we're having difficulty with getting enough lawyers. And so you're talking about practice environment, and with the backlog that we have, are the courts open to this idea of, obviously the pandemic forced the change quickly, that we would, be having hearings by Zoom and filing electronically. And now that's all shifted back, but we still have this huge backlog and not enough lawyers to take on the cases. So do you see this resolving? Do you see the courts finding a way to continue this, or what do you see happening there?
So let me just frame the answer in 3 major subject areas that have changed in the practice environment. 1 is Zoom, 2 is e-filing, and 3rd is docketing. And we need to talk about all 3 a little bit, because the docketing issue is courts want to make sure no court time is wasted. So they want to make sure that they have a number of cases stacked up, ready to go. So if a case settles, the next case can slot in. Makes perfectly good sense from their perspective. The problem with that is it requires the attorneys to be preparing multiple cases in multiple counties in the same time period, which is impractical. So those are the 3 things we're talking about. On the issue of e-filing, and I don't know whether the committee members have seen this, but the U.S. Postal Service has actually formally downgraded its performance expectation for first-class mail to 5 business days, which 5 business days really means a week. And so that means that with courts pumping out very short notices to get people into court and fill up the court time, it's impossible to rely on USPS to file, for example, a motion to continue a proceeding safely. And so lawyers now have to get in the car and hand delivery. So it sounds like e-filing is a matter of convenience, but it really is a matter of serious matter of efficiency. The courts have explained to me that there are a number of reasons that they were opposed to continuing e-filing, one of which was the cost of printing all the stuff that lawyers were sending in. So we are actively exploring with the IT department putting printers in the clerk's offices and having a print facility of some kind that allows MCLS lawyers to print to the clerk's offices, so the clerks take them off the printer just as though they open them out. It's going to be really expensive, but I think it's going to be less expensive than continuing to pay people to drive to the courts. We don't have a bottom line on that yet, but we're working on that. So the courts are open to a solution there. So that's happening. On the issue of Zoom appearances, I don't have a commitment. I have interest from the chief, who has been very, very engaged with me, and from the trial chiefs in the district court and the superior court. They've explained to me that Maine's sort of tradition of judicial, excuse me, I have a pop-up on my window. I just wanted to go away. So it doesn't, okay. So Maine's tradition of judicial independence really prevents the judicial management from imposing precise structures on the judges. So as I understand that, even if they were inclined, the chiefs can't say, judges, you shall allow people to appear by Zoom. I have been trying to work with the judges that I engage with to promote the use of Zoom. In addition to the survey responses that you will have seen in the material I provided, we get lots of emails, and we very frequently get emails that say something like, I would go to Aroostook County to take the case, but only if I could be assured that the administrative proceedings until we get to a trial will be by Zoom. I don't think Zoom is a substitute for in-person. I think in-person is much better. I hold myself to that. I was excited at the point where I thought we would be in the same room today, and I'm looking forward for when we do that. But at this point, Zoom is necessary. to avoid the bleeding. And so I think that the judiciary is starting to understand that. I have been very vocal with them as frequently as I can without treading into being impolite to say, there will come a day soon, I will not have a lawyer for you in your court if you do not promise that that lawyer can appear by Zoom. So that's all I can. I've joked that I feel like Moses. I have no power, but I come with a plague. And so all I can do is continue to show the judiciary that plague and hope that they come around on it. On the issue of docketing, I've been much less successful. The judges want the dockets to move. They want to make sure they don't waste a moment. I completely understand and respect that, but it absolutely doesn't work. I've had two particular anecdotes, and there are many more of these, but a lawyer with a Rockland case had a Somerset County case. The Somerset County case, it was agreed by everybody, would go subordinate to the Rockland case so that there wouldn't be a direct scheduling conflict. But the Somerset County court required the Rockland attorney to be ready to go in Somerset County if the Rockland case folded, which meant that all of the witnesses had to be prepped, all the subpoenas had to be done, all of the work had to be done for both cases. Even though he was sure Rockland would go, there was some very small chance that it would not, and Rockland is going, so that time, other time is wasted. And the problem is that time, a lot of it has to get duplicated. Memoranda you've written, you don't have to write again, but you do have to go back and look at the file again. You do have to talk to the witnesses again. Trial prep isn't trial prep if the trial is delayed 4 or 5 months, and you have to, and so there's huge duplication of time and cost for MCILS baked in there. And so far, I have not been successful in pushing that, pushing that away. I think that answers the question you asked me, but I'm famous for not answering your questions in the way that you all meant. So I'm happy for clarifying. Are you
No, that
frozen on me?
does. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Senator Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Andrus, I'm wondering if you can either point me in your memo, because I might have missed it, or if not, if you can get the information in terms of the number of attorneys and the caseloads. I'm only seeing totals, and I don't see a breakdown between criminal defense, protective custody cases, juvenile cases, and involuntary commitments. Am I missing that?
No, I don't think I provided that in the memorandum because I may have erred on the side of not going deeply enough into the weeds, but I can produce that for you.
Thank you. I would appreciate it.
Sure. Are you asking for the current caseloads or caseloads over time? I just want to make sure I get you the right data.
The same information that you provided in your memo in terms of the totals. I'd just like to see those broken down a little bit more, only for myself, although I'm very interested in the entire system. I am and always have been, anyone who knows me, more focused on the child protective aspect, which is kind of oftentimes the forgotten stepchild of MCILS, because it's not the majority. The majority are criminal defense, and I understand that. But I'd really like to see what's going on in the other areas, and not just the overall, and not just criminal defense. Thank you.
I will provide you, all of you, with that. And I will just reassure you, Senator, that a big part of my practice was child protective. And so we wind up talking about the Sixth Amendment specifically, but our focus in the office is apportioned reasonably between the two areas. And candidly, my biggest concerns at the moment are on the child protective side, not the criminal side. So that's a discussion worth continuing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Arata, followed by Senator Khan.
Thank you. How ironic that we're appearing on Zoom, yet the attorneys aren't permitted to do so. Is there anything that we can do to help the judiciary move to Zoom and e-filing and get into the modern century? I know at the Appropriations Committee, as we've appropriated money to modernize the system in the past. Is this completely out of our control? Is there anything we can do?
I don't know the answer, to be direct, because I'm not clear on where the overlap is between legislative and appropriations oversight of the AOC lies, Administrative Office of the Courts for the listeners. And so I hesitate because I genuinely don't know how to answer it. As we go forward, we're very much hoping that the Odyssey project that the court's engaged in is going to help alleviate some of the e-filing things, but it doesn't solve it in the short term. And so I'm not sure I have more than that to offer.
Okay, and a second question I have is regarding billing. Several comments were that I guess if they don't bill on time, they don't get paid. Is that accurate? They don't get paid at all if they're 91 days?
It is accurate.
That seems a bit harsh.
So there is an existing rule that predates me, although it was not enforced until the commission directed me to enforce it shortly after I arrived here. There is also in process a rule modification to permit discretion on my part to address those bills. So as it reads right now, the statute reads, the rule reads that bills submitted after 90 days shall not be paid. There's simply no discretion for me to decide that there was a good reason. Under the proposed changes, there will be discretion to say, okay, that's a reasonable basis. It is my intent that anyone who's had a bill rejected for the 90-day rule will have an opportunity to resubmit that bill and present an argument to me on a revised statute for why, a revised rule for why I should consider it timely and accept it. And I did see a lot of people talking about it. I will tell you, it is very, very, very few bills. And with 100% of the folks invited to resubmit the bills when the rule changes. So it's not quite as black and white as the as some of the responses suggest. And I understand on the day you don't get paid, you don't get paid, and that that's problematic.
When do you expect that rule amendment to occur?
I don't know when it will go into effect. I wanted to stop making piecemeal changes to our rules, and so at our commission meeting last week, we were talking about rolling into a broad-based overhaul of the rules that need to be brought into line with what we're actually doing, or with what we should be doing. But I don't have a deadline for when that rule will be changed.
Okay, and one last thing. One of the commenters said that they would like to invite the critics to see hands-on exactly what they do each day, and I'm not going to spend a week with this person, but I would spend a day with this person. So I'm calling them out. I don't know who it is. So, but you can send me an email if you want.
I also have no way to know who it is because the results were anonymized. And before I ever saved the results, I deleted the IP addresses because I didn't realize it was going to give me IP addresses. But if any of you want to see what these folks do, I can connect you with folks who would be happy, I think, to show you. So I can email with you later about that. I don't know how to identify that particular person.
Yeah, I need more excitement in my life, so that would help. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Khan.
Thank you. One other follow-up, reading through the report that you've given us, one of the areas that we had asked for updates on is the determination of indigency. And I didn't see anything in your report about any changes that have been there. I mean, you did discuss screener operations and the collection of fees, but not necessarily the determination. I'm just wondering if there was any discussion around that, or if that's not something you're looking at right now. You could just help me understand that a little better.
I'm trying to think about how to answer. I'm trying to think about how to hear the question because the information I gave to me addressed what we were doing. So I guess part of the answer is there isn't an ongoing operation to change how we're determining indigency. I heard that as part of the question. We do have updated financial guidelines for the year. That's just a change in the numbers. We sent that out to the court some months ago when we received that information. The screener operations have been diminished because we did have 2 screeners leave. We have a new screener in Bangor who is scheduled to start, has been hired, is scheduled to start imminently. Originally scheduled to start yesterday, but there was a delay of a couple of days. The Portland position, we're still interviewing for, looking for a good candidate. And we're still in the midst of that process, but it's active and ongoing. But in terms of the question of the functional determination, which is what I think is part of your question, there isn't really a new change there.
Okay, I haven't read through the Sixth Amendment report for a while, but I thought one of the things that they highlighted, and correct me if your memory is different than this, was just that there wasn't necessarily consistency in the determination of indigency across courts.
There isn't necessarily perfect consistency in the determination of indigency across courts, which calls into light one of the areas of issue that I think over the next year we need to do work on, some of which is outside of the specific things we tend to talk about in these meetings, so bear with me for a minute. But there are too many places where the judicial branch is making part of the determination and we're making part of the determination. So remember that the determination of indigency, is not an MCILS function at all. The screener helps a person fill out a financial application in those courts where we have screeners. And even when we're fully staffed, we don't have screeners in all of our courts. At that point, the court makes a determination about whether or not a person is indigent. And we have no input there. And it's coupled back around with the issue that although we maintain the lists of people we've designated eligible to take cases, it's ultimately the court who makes the appointments. And so there's an interplay there that I think we need to be working on. In my report, I was talking a little bit about the memorandum of understanding that expired between MCILS and the AOC. And we want to broaden the MOU to include things like screener operations and indigency determinations. But at the moment, those issues of courts applying indigency determinations differently, I have no good way to know how many there are. I don't have data or the ability to obtain it at the moment, but it's also not something I can directly control, even if I mean, we have consistent rules, right? So we've promulgated guidelines, we have rules, but where they're applied inconsistently is outside of my ability to simply fix.
Thank you.
And I guess, and forgive me for continuing, I'm running in every area into the same answer, which is that I'm now up to places that are external to us in most respects and have run out of the ability to cause things to happen. I can ask for things to happen. But in almost every area of our operations at this point, the limiting factor is the responsiveness and cooperation of folks outside the agency. It sounds like a cop-out, but it's not. It's extremely frustrating to get to a point where we can't improve, client security for communications with counsel because I can't get a dialogue going with DOC that's bilateral. I can't improve the filing issue or whatever because I can't get a communication going with AOC that's bilateral. The court has started responding to me, but up until our meeting last Monday, the court hadn't responded to me in many weeks. And I appreciate them engaging, but it did not happen until I got on television and said they're not talking to me. And that's become the reality really across the board. So you're going to hear that a lot from me. I mean, I don't stop pushing, but I don't have the ability to make other people, in this instance, judges doing indigency determinations, comply with my mandates.
Mhm. Yes, thank you for that more complete answer. And it's something that I will follow up on myself as well. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm certainly open to working with you on that outside of, the group, if that's helpful.
Further questions or comments for Director Andrews? One final one, Justin, from me. On page 4 of your report, under audits, you did do some work in the interim on developing processes for audit. However, you've not been authorized to hire the attorney staff you need for that process. Did you mention at the beginning of your report, did information change since you submitted this report?
Yes. And so last week, Bureau of Human Resources did advance the hiring process. I believe it was Friday that the positions were actually posted publicly. And so now all 6 of our newly authorized positions are open for hiring. I believe we set that for a 30-day period. And we intend, as soon as we're able, to begin interviewing even within that period so we can get people on board pretty promptly.
And how would you rate your current process, notwithstanding the staff that are coming on board soon? How would you rate the current process compared with the process of internal review, say, 3 years ago?
3 years ago or 3 months ago? I'm sorry, Senator.
3 years ago. I just picked a random number.
Okay. It's hard to quantify. What I can say is that my process is better now than it was 9 months ago or 8 months ago, whenever it was I came on board. And that it's still imperfect given the volume. And so we're doing a much better job at communicating expectations, and we're seeing fewer instances that where it looks like people are violating the expectations. So that seems to be working. We've got many fewer high hour triggers than we used to, although it's ramping back up again as people are going back into the courtroom more frequently. We're seeing more people be more precise in accounting for their 12-hour errors. We've had quite a few people discover small errors and send us checks to account. Typically, those are small. Somebody put 3 hours and charged $180 when they should have put 0.3 and charged 60, so they send us $120. But it's happening, at least. I think that, to be fair, what we're doing is too sporadic and anecdotal to be considered an audit system. The rudiment, as I understand it, of an audit system is that it's consistent, and its utility lies in part through the fact that it can be reproduced. The process can be reproduced. It's not something we can do now. So it's still a lot of ad hoc reviewing vouchers, reviewing the non-council invoices. I want to say, I said this in the report, but I want to call out Lynn Nash from our operation, who really does a phenomenal job of checking both the non-council invoices and also the lawyer of the day invoices. That turns out to be the most error-prone part of our operation, is the lawyer of the day stuff. In terms of, when I say error-prone, I mean in billing, not in the client services. And so she's checking every one of those to make sure that they're appropriate and correct. So in those areas, there's actually really good accountability, frankly. And that's because Lynn is able to do those things and do them well.
Good, thank you. Final questions or comments for Director Andrews? Seeing none, Lucia, do you want to speak briefly to OPEGA's planned follow-up work and the status? And
Sure. I can give you a brief update. As you well know, we've been pivoting quite a bit towards the Child Protective Services work. So there was a remaining piece of work with MCILS that OPEGA was working on related to indigency determination and collections from the partially indigent clients. And so that was a piece of work that was slated to be finished up later this fall. And so we did survey of judges and interviews with screeners and other staff and sort of collecting some information about these questions about, as Senator Kime mentioned, consistency was one of the questions, consistency in indigency determination. So in light of the prioritization of the Child Protective Services work, we are trying to figure out a strategy for the best to position that in the best way to have it ready to wrap up when we have resources available. My currently planning to see what you heard today, and staff have been wrapping up the work that they were engaged in as the child protective work got added to our plate, and wrapping it up to a point that I can sort of take stock of where we are with that, what the report that you got today, and work with the chairs, and then perhaps at the next meeting, speak to the GOC about where to go from here, given the resource constraints for those two remaining questions that were outstanding that would have otherwise been tied up by the end of this year.
Thank you, Lucia. So I think we will carry that piece of the conversation forward to the November meeting. It was pretty clear at the last meeting that the GOC wants child protective prioritized over some of these other projects. However, the director and her staff have the ability to manage their work as they need to accomplish the goals we've set out. So, and final thoughts, comments, questions on this agenda item? Seeing none, Director Andrus, Deputy Director Masiak, again, appreciate your efforts. Thank you for the detailed report and very interesting survey results. It's enjoyable reading. Enjoyable is not the right word. Interesting reading, for sure. Look forward to our next quarterly check-in.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is a review of Child Abuse and Prevention Treatment Act review panels. We've invited a number of representatives to attend and give a brief overview of their scope of work in the constellation of Child Protective Services oversight systems. The intention, I think, for this section of the agenda is to give GOC a high-level overview of this component. The staff are busy working on their analysis of all of these different parts, but for the benefit of members primarily and the public, chairs and staff thought this might be a good opportunity to help get us oriented to that landscape. So we've asked Bobby Johnson, Associate Director of Child Welfare Services for OCFS, to appear today. Bobby also serves as the co-chair of the Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel. We have Deborah Dunlap, who's the Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel Citizen Chair. I believe they are co-chairs together. We've also invited Betsy Boardman, who's coordinator for the Justice for Children Task Force. That's another entity required by the federal law. And we have Mark Moran, Child Death and Serious Injury Panel co-chair. So they are all, I believe they're all with us today. If it works for the invitees, we will go with the order in which I just listed folks. So if Bobby Johnson wants to make a brief presentation and remarks to us, you're welcome to. Good morning, Ms. Johnson, and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Senator Libby, Representative McDonald, and members of the Joint Standing Government Oversight Committee. My name is Bobby Johnson, and I'm the Associate Director of Child Welfare Services within the Office of Child and Family Services. I am here today to provide an overview of the legislation which requires the Department of Health and Human Services to convene the Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel, the Justice for Children Task Force, and the Child Death and Serious Injury Review Panel, all of which I am a member. My colleagues who either chair or coordinate the panels will speak more specifically about the mission and function of each individual panel. The Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, or CAPTA, was first enacted in 1974 and is the primary federal legislation which addresses child abuse and neglect and defines these matters federally. Through CAPTA, states receive federal funding and direction related to areas of prevention, assessment, investigation, prosecution, and treatment of child abuse and neglect. Since its enactment in 1974, there have been many amendments and reauthorizations to CAPTA. Notably, in 1996, states were required to establish citizen review panels, or CRPs. The CRP's function is to review states' compliance with its CAPTA plan and federal child protection standards. Reauthorizations in 2003 and 2010 further defined the role of CRPs as entities that both evaluate practice, policy, and procedures and develop means for public outreach and comment. Through these reauthorizations, child welfare agencies were mandated to respond to their CRP's annual reports in writing, and membership expectations were further defined. In addition to CAPTA, the Children's Justice Act requires states to establish or designate and maintain a state multidisciplinary task force on children's justice, composed of professionals with knowledge and experience relating to the criminal justice system and issues of child physical abuse, child neglect, child sexual abuse and exploitation, and child maltreatment related fatalities. By July of 1999, most states were required to host 3 separate citizen review panels. While each panel holds the responsibility to review compliance of their state's child protection agencies, the panels are also authorized to review other areas that they consider important. Membership of the CRPs must include volunteers who are broadly representative of the state's communities, including individuals with expertise in the areas of prevention and treatment of child abuse and neglect. Panels are mandated to meet at least quarterly and must produce annual reports which describe the panel's activities and recommendations to the state or local child protection agency. In Maine, the Child Welfare Advisory Panel, the Justice for Children Task Force, and the Child Death and Serious Injury Review Panel comprise the 3 citizen review panels. While these panels are mostly comprised of community stakeholders, each also have several staff from the Office of Child and Family Services as members, which is required through legislation, bylaws, or charter. While mandated to meet quarterly, Maine CRPs meet monthly throughout the year, barring a 2-month recess for July and August. Historically, panel meetings were held in person, typically in Augusta. In March 2020, the panels were forced to pivot their approach due to the pandemic and began hosting virtual meetings. The panels have seen success with this format, reducing members' commutes and cancellations due to inclement weather, as well as improving members' ability to participate more frequently in meetings. In addition to the CRPs themselves, each panel has subcommittees tasked with specialized areas of focus. The groups typically meet outside of panel meetings and report back to the larger group during the monthly meetings. Representatives from each of Maine's panels have recently begun meeting as a group, in part to coordinate efforts, but also to keep the other panels apprised of initiatives or recommendations. The panel appointees have agreed that interpanel partnership is paramount and plan to begin meeting quarterly at a minimum. While the CRPs write formal reports on an annual basis, recommendations are discussed on an ongoing basis during meetings. Oftentimes, members who sit on the panels are in positions to implement recommendations within their agencies without having to wait for a formal report at the end of the reporting period. The recommendations yielded from the meetings not only consider the work of OCFS, but also the broader child welfare system. In addition to the partnership between panel representatives, the panels collaborate in a variety of other ways. There is some crossover in membership amongst the panels. A few members who sit on one panel also sit on another panel. This allows for increased awareness and discussion related to the other panel's efforts, ensuring that the work that is being produced by each panel complements the work of the others and that efforts are not being duplicated. Additionally, members from each of the 3 panels sat on a subcommittee tasked with developing a shared citizen review panel website. This website includes information about each panel's mission, provides the public with access to meeting minutes and annual reports, and lists a variety of statewide resources available to Maine citizens. The Citizen Review Panel website that was developed also includes a contact form in which citizens, including families engaged with the department or providers who work within the child welfare system, may share feedback with the panels about their experiences. This has allowed for greater engagement with the public and for panel members to stay apprised of areas of strength or challenge that Maine citizens have highlighted. In addition to citizen engagement, the panels also collaborate with OCFS in a variety of ways. One example is that the Maine Child Welfare Advisory panel members are included in the development of new OCFS policies. This allows the valuable feedback of community stakeholders to be considered before a policy is finalized. Maine citizen review panels collaborate with other statewide panels, including the DV Homicide Review Panel and the Maternal, Fetal, and Infant Mortality Review Panel. Lastly, members from Maine CRP have had the opportunity to network and collaborate with national partners, including through participation in the National CRP Conference, which is held annually. I appreciate the opportunity to share information with this committee about the citizen review panels. And next, Deb Dunlap will discuss the Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Are there questions or comments from the committee for Ms. Johnson? I just have one, Ms. Johnson. I was looking at the committee minutes. I think the most recent one is from March of 2021. So there's quite a bit of time that's passed where we're not able to see what the group has been discussing. I'm particularly interested in the meetings from May, June, July, and August. That's something you can work on and get back to us when those items are going to be updated.
Yes, Senator Libby, I can have the meeting minutes from May and June added. The panel did not meet in July or August. Those are 2 months that we take off each year. But I will have those updated by the end of this week.
Okay. And then another question is like, does the statute establishing the Child Welfare Advisory Council require an OCFS staff member to serve as co-chair, or is that something you were elected by the group? The reason I'm asking is oftentimes our advisory groups do not have staff who are being overseen serving as leaders of that advisory group.
So that was built into the original redesign, and I know that Deb Dunlap will speak more about that. It has been something that over time, I think that initially it was a very department-led group of individuals, and that over time we've shifted that to being a citizen review panel where I've taken a secondary role as the co-chair, and Deb has taken the primary role as the citizen co-chair.
Okay, so it's not a
It's not,
requirement.
sorry. Correct. I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question, Senator Libby. It is not a requirement of the CAPTA or CJA legislation.
Yeah. Ms. Johnson, I hope you don't take the question personally. It's a general oversight question. Nothing about you. It's just more of how the structure is set up.
Correct. I do not take it personally, and it's one of the things that for the Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel Executive Committee that we had been talking about.
Thank you. Question or comment from Senator Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the CRPs in general, what role, if any, is there for attorneys who represent parents in child protective matters?
I'm trying to think of the membership of the 3 panels. So the Justice for Children's Task Force includes parents' attorneys. The Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel is a panel that we have been recruiting additional membership from some of the places where we don't have members. And that's one of the conversations we've actually been having over the summer, is trying to identify a parent's attorney to be part of that panel. And I don't believe that is a group that's represented on the Child Death and Serious Injury Review panel, although we did just add 2 district attorneys to serve on that panel.
Senator Bailey, are you good?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. See no other questions. We will go now to Deborah Dunlap. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Senator Libby, Representative McDonald, and members of the committee. My name is Deborah Dunlap, and I'm the citizen co-chair of the Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel. As you've heard from Director Johnson, this panel is one of Maine's 3 citizen review panels for child welfare that's mandated under the Federal Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act. This panel is a group of 22 professionals and private citizens who evaluate the overall effectiveness of the state child protective agencies. The other 2 citizen review panels that you'll hear from today are focused on specialized areas. The Justice for Children Task Force focuses on the judicial aspects of child welfare, and the Child Death and Serious Injury Review Panel conducts in-depth case reviews of child deaths and serious injuries. There are representatives from these other 2 citizen review panels who serve on the Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel. There are also 4 non-voting panel members from the Office of Child and Family Services, including Director Johnson, as well as a CAPTA coordinator who provides support for the activities of the panel. Other panel members represent medical, behavioral, and mental health services, the courts, Maine tribes, children's disability services, foster, adoptive, and kinship families, domestic violence and sexual assault services, youth advocates and homeless youth services, parent groups, and child abuse and neglect councils. The panel currently has open seats for representatives from the legislature, from early childhood and schools, substance use treatment and recovery, and also for parents or family members who have been personally involved with the child welfare system. The full panel meets for 2 hours each month on the first Friday of the month, 10 times annually, to review the policies, procedures, and practices of the State Child Protective Agency. Over the past few years, the panel has established working subcommittees to examine areas of interest in depth. And these work groups meet between meetings and present their findings to the full panel. The current subcommittees are focused on family-centered policy and practice, communication and coordination of care for children who are entering the child protective system, and father engagement. This panel also provides for public outreach to assess the impact that current practices are having on children and families in the community. This has historically been done every 3 years through surveys of service providers who work with families involved with the child welfare system. And in 2018, the panel also established a parent survey to receive input directly from families. Both of these surveys are actually out again. It's been 3 years since our last, and we have both of them out as we speak. We've got a deadline of October 15th for those to come back. We have also started to receive more direct feedback from parents through our newly updated website. We've had 3 different parents reach out over the last few months, and the panel is reviewing their feedback as well. And continuing to build capacity to expand and extend public outreach is one of the primary focuses of the panel this year. The panel uses the information that we collect from evaluations and from feedback to make formal recommendations for training policies and practices. And these are issued in an annual report each January that includes responses back from the department. It's important to note that the role of the citizen review panels is to provide evaluation and recommendations. None of the 3 panels have the authority to mandate change. The Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel has been focused over the past several years on clarifying our roles and responsibilities and updating the ways that we work together to meet our federal mandates. And the history of this panel and the supporting infrastructure provides some really important background. In 2015, there were 3 different groups that served this purpose of evaluating and making recommendations to improve the Child Welfare Agency. One was called the Citizen Review Panel, another the Child Abuse Action Network, and the third the Child Welfare Steering Committee. In September of 2015, the Office of Child and Family Services notified all three groups that administrative support would be ending for the Citizen Review Panel and the Child Welfare Steering Committee. And members of these groups were invited to join the Child Abuse Action Network to form a single group. The new entity that formed in December 2015 included members of all three former groups and was renamed the Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel. The new panel was charged with meeting all of the Citizen Review Panel requirements that are outlined under CAPTA Section 106C. To examine the policies, procedures, and practices of state and local child protective agencies and evaluate the extent to which the agencies are effectively discharging their child protection responsibilities. To provide for public outreach and comment to assess the impact of current procedures and practices on children and families in the community. And to prepare an annual report containing a summary of these activities of the panel and recommendations to improve the Child Protective Service system, and also to make this report available to the public. The Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel was also charged with meeting some of the requirements under the Federal Children's Justice Act. This includes conducting that 3-year comprehensive assessment of the child welfare system as a whole and making recommendations based on this assessment that are related to the handling of cases of child abuse and neglect and the impact on children and families. Identifying experimental model and demonstration programs to test innovative approaches and reforms to laws, policies, protocols, and procedures. So while this all might sound straightforward as I'm telling it today, in 2016, a majority of the panel members weren't aware of the federal mandates. When the groups were merging, many former members left and many new members joined, myself included. Just after the Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel was formed, there were also administrative changes in the Office of Child and Family Services. At that time, the CAPTA coordinator position within OCFS took responsibility for the panel. With an OCFS position convening and facilitating meetings, most panel members didn't understand that we were a federally mandated citizen review panel whose members should be taking the lead on evaluation and on issuing annual reports with formal recommendations. Instead, the panel made real-time recommendations to OCFS leaders during meetings, and the CAPTA coordinator position took the lead on writing all the annual reports based on recommendations that members had made during meetings throughout the year. In 2017, panel members identified the need to create new bylaws and to clearly define our role and our structure. This resulted in a review of the CAPTA and CJA statute by members and gave us a new understanding of the role and responsibilities of the panel. In 2018, the panel updated our bylaws, created a process guide to clarify panel practices, and established an annual retreat for members. The panel moved meeting facilitation duties away from OCFS staff over to the citizen co-chair, and members started to take the lead on conducting evaluations and on writing the annual report. The panel also reconnected with the National Citizen Review Panel peer group through the Capacity Building Center for States, and one of their consultants came to provide a training and technical support related to the panel's role and responsibilities at the 2019 retreat. Also in 2019, a few of our panel members worked with state legislators to pass LD 192, an act to require an annual report on the activities of the Maine Child Welfare Advisory Panel to improve the panel's communication with the legislature. Over the past few years, recommendations in our annual reports have been aligned with PCG, OPEGA, and the Child Welfare Ombudsman reports. Some of the themes include training and support for the child welfare workforce, improving casework and engagement with parents and caregivers, and also how the state child protective agency coordinates with the other parts of the whole child protective system that includes law enforcement, healthcare providers, community-based organizations. MCWAP's annual reports from 2016 to 2020 are available on the website that we share with the two other citizen review panels. That's mecitizenreviewpanels.com. And as required by LD 192, the panel's reports are also presented to the Health and Human Services Committee annually. I want to thank you on behalf of the panel for the opportunity to present to the committee today, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Dunlap. Are there questions or comments from the committee? Senator Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just eating my lunch, so my apologies. I think you mentioned that one of the vacancies you have currently is the legislature vacancy. Can you just tell me, first of all, who makes that appointment, and just why that spot is vacant and what we might be able to do to help fill it?
We would love to have you help fill it. I think we've reached out. We've actually had conversations with a few representatives over the years who have expressed interest, but as soon as the session starts, they find it really difficult to make it to meetings. And so I think that could be a conversation that we would love for you to have. It is listed as one of the required representatives in our bylaws, and so we would really love to get it filled. And if you have ideas on how to do that in a way that's friendly, our meetings are the first Friday of every month from 9 to 11. And now that they're on Zoom, we actually intend to keep them that way. So we're hoping that may make it, we found that that's made some other representation a little bit easier for folks to be able to fill. And we would love to see a legislator take that chair.
And who makes the appointment?
So these aren't appointed, they're more invitations. And so I think it would be appropriate for you to consider in this committee and also on Health and Human Services if there are folks who are interested in participating.
So who would, if there are people listening or members of this committee or HHS who are willing to serve, who would they contact?
They could contact me or Director Johnson, and we can, the way that a new member gets approved is through a voting process with the full panel. And so, but again, it's more based on that sort of the representation of that seat. And we would love to have you. Anyone who's interested in volunteering and wants to volunteer 2 hours a month, plus maybe a little bit extra in between, we would love to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator DeChambeau. Senator, you're on mute.
Thank you, Senator Libby. I did highlight that. Matter of fact, we just got these reports maybe 20 minutes ago, so I printed them out as someone was speaking, and have highlighted when you did speak about the open seats that, and I'm surprised you said that they were like by invitation. Usually legislators are either appointed by the speaker or the president to serve on certain ones. And if that is true, you said you had other open seats for early childhood in schools, and of all things, substance use treatment and recovery. And I took special note of that because we have heard repeatedly DHS caseworkers, one of the problematic areas in dealing with families is the substance abuse issue. So again, would that answer apply that it's by invitation, or would a substance abuse treatment person say, I'm interested in that? And so, in other words, the commissioner of DHS doesn't review who's on these committees. It's just, I find that so hard to say that that's a good idea. We just heard about 3 committees. Looking at this first time, I said, it just appears so haphazard. I just don't know where the trail ends. And you said some people sit on more than one committee. So I guess I asked about 5 questions in that, Ms. Dunlap, and I apologize for that. But could you elaborate a little bit more about how these committees are formed?
Sure. I'll try to answer all of your questions. So I think you heard in my presentation that it has the experience has been a little haphazard, right? It was very confusing for folks coming in. These again are citizen review panels, and so the formation typically, according to the folks that provide us technical support throughout the country, they're not appointed. These aren't appointed panels. They're citizen volunteers who are willing to devote their time to this. We have particular representation that we are required under CAPTA and our own bylaws to make sure is being met. But it's really on a volunteer basis, not on an appointment basis. It actually has been, Director Johnson referenced this in response to Senator Libby's question, but it was a little confusing in the beginning. Typically, there are not co-chairs from the department. These aren't department led. This particular citizen review panel is not a department-led initiative. It's designed to be led by citizens in partnership. The department is required to be a part of it, but they're typically not leaders or chairs or making appointments of the folks who serve on it. It really is intended to be driven by citizen volunteers. And I can connect the committee with the national technical assistance that we've received to try to sort through some of this, because as you said, it was a little confusing over the years, and we're trying to really sort it out. So we're really meeting all of the expectations under the federal mandates. And I'm not sure I answered everything. I feel like there might've been something else there.
All right, and when there is a report made, because I'm trying to find out where, a lot of what you spoke, and not only yourself, but the previous speaker, are matters that the ombudsman pays attention to and submits a formal report. Mm-hmm. So your committee submits a report to whom, please?
Yeah, so you'll hear, so there are actually three, this is where it gets confusing. There are three different citizen review panels. Ours is the one that looks at the overall, the way that the overall system is working. So we're the broadest scope, but we don't review individual cases. Okay. And you'll hear from the folks who do that's the Child Death and Serious Injury Review Panel that does specific case reviews. We take sort of like overall feedback, and then we look for patterns and identify ways that the system as a whole could be improved. So when you hear from Betsy, she'll talk about the one that's focused on the judicial and court experience of families. And then Mark will speak to the one that really does the very specific case reviews. So for us, we're more broad-based. We're really looking at how all the elements of the system are working together and where there are places where that needs to be improved. And I remembered one of your other questions was about the representation of folks from substance use, recovery, and treatment. Part of why we don't say that we have we actually have folks who are currently on the panel who are connected to that work, but we don't allow one person to represent more than one of those, of each of our mandated representations. So we do have folks who bring that experience to the table through their organizations. There's some CAP agencies that are there. There's some mental health providers who touch on that. But if you're serving as representation of someone who serves, say, children with disabilities, we wouldn't also say you can also. This was a decision we made when we redid our bylaws, that we made it really clear, like, we're asking you to serve as one in one role and not to wear multiple hats. So that's part of why that is. That's not, expertise isn't necessarily absent from the conversation, but someone who's specifically representing that is currently, we don't have that seat filled.
Thank you. I think there's a lot to read and really decipher that. Thank you.
Sure. I think if you can get that there are three different panels and this one is the broadest one, that might be helpful. Oh, and then the other question you asked was where the reports are issued. So that's actually part of why we worked on LD 192, because the reports, as I spoke about in the history, the reports were really only being sent as part of the federal reporting process for those first few years, when the citizen members started to step in and say, we really need to take more responsibility for issuing this. That was when we realized there really was no place for it to go, right? It was being a part of a federal report. The website still wasn't, we were still in the process of updating the website. So it would just sit somewhere where maybe nobody would ever see it. And that's part of why our members actually reached out to legislators and said, we'd really like to make sure that there's a more formal process for getting this information and these recommendations to the legislature and to other folks who might be making some policy level decisions, so that you're informed about what it is that we've evaluated and reported and made recommendations about over the year.
Thank you. Further questions or comments for Ms. Dunlap? Seeing none, thank you for your service and thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. And so I think we were going to go to Betsy Boardman next to talk about the Children's Justice Task Force.
Thank you, Ms. Dunlap. I was about to recognize Betsy Boardman to make a presentation next.
Good afternoon, Senator Libby, Representative McDonald, and distinguished members of the Government Oversight Committee. My name is Betsy Boardman, and I am the Juvenile and Child Protective Process Specialist at the Maine Judicial Branch. I am also a member of and staff the Justice for Children Task Force. The Justice for Children Task Force is a collaborative, multidisciplinary task force that is comprised of 38 child welfare stakeholders, including representatives from all three branches of government, as well as advocates for children, parents, and foster parents. The chair of the task force is the Chief Justice of the Maine Supreme Judicial Court, Chief Justice Valerie Stanville. The work of the task force is done in collaboration and conjunction with the work of the executive and legislative branches, along with the appropriate child welfare agencies. The Justice for Children Task Force focuses on improvement of safety, permanency, and well-being of children in the state of Maine child welfare system. In order to accomplish this, the task force regularly identifies strengths and systemic barriers within the child welfare system that have an effect on a child's safety, permanency, and well-being. The task force also prioritizes issues and develops joint solutions to remove any identified barriers. The task force also identifies training needs of stakeholders involved in the child welfare system. They also establish goals, establish timelines for steps toward each goal, and monitor and evaluate process. Additionally, the task force provides input and feedback regarding statewide performance standards for the timely resolution of matters involving children and families in the child welfare system. The Justice for Children Task Force currently has 3 subcommittees. Those subcommittees include the Continuing Education Subcommittee, the Parent Curriculum Subcommittee, and the Race and Equity Data Collection Subcommittee. Over the past couple of years, the Justice for Children Task Force subcommittees have taken on and completed initiatives that include working with the Department of Health and Human Services to revise the reunification plans given to parents involved in the child welfare system to improve readability and function, as well as, and as also previously mentioned, creating a central repository for information pertaining to all 3 citizen review panels. All Justice for Children Task Force minutes, agendas, and annual reports are available on the public site. That is with one exception, which is the March minutes are not posted. I will get to this in a little bit. The Justice for Children Task Force meets quarterly, with the subcommittee groups meeting monthly. And so we do have one meeting's information that is not available. Currently, the subcommittees for the Justice for Children Task Force are working on initiatives that focus on providing ongoing training for child protection stakeholders, improving parent engagement, and assessing the collection of race and equity data by system partners. Specifically, the Continuing Education Subcommittee throughout the year assists in planning an annual child welfare conference for child welfare stakeholders. Attendees include parents' attorneys, assistant attorney generals, DHS caseworkers, guardian ad litem, CASA volunteers, judges, tribal representatives, as well as tribal court representatives, members of the Legislature's Committee on Judiciary, and other invited stakeholders. This year, the Continuing Education Subcommittee has planned and implemented 6 skills-based trainings on 2 different subjects that were delivered by the National Institute of Child Advocacy. There will also be a 1-day plenary session for all stakeholders at the end of October. The Parent Curriculum Subcommittee is in the early phases of planning a 1-year pilot project, which focuses on parent education and engagement. The project involves the development of an optional curriculum that would be offered to parents involved in the child welfare system and would include information on stakeholder identities and roles, the court process, and tips on successful engagement in case plans and reunification services. The program would be created and delivered by a parent who has previously navigated the child welfare system, along with input from other system stakeholders. The Race and Equity Data Committee was formed when the Justice for Children Task Force recognized that the collection and sharing of aggregated data among the various project partners is vital in order to inform policy decisions, measure fairness and equity, and provide the courts and other agencies with data about the people and populations that they serve. To that end, the Race and Equity Committee has recently released a request for proposal for a project manager to conduct an assessment of data points collected by specific child welfare partners. Data points include race, ethnicity, connection to tribe, band, nation, enrollment, and eligibility with a federally recognized tribe, sexual orientation, income, location, gender identity, and disability. The project partners include the Maine Judicial Branch, Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Child and Family Services, Child Welfare Services, Department of Corrections, Department of Public Safety, and Department of Education. In order to accomplish all the previously named tasks, the Justice for Children Task Force meets quarterly, and the subcommittee groups often meet on a monthly basis. The task force issues an annual report by January 15th of each year.
Thank you, Ms. Boardman. Are there questions or comments from Ms. Boardman? We'll start with Senator DeChambeau, followed by Senator Bailey.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Boardman. Ms. Boardman, you really gave a lot of information. And did you submit your testimony, written testimony, that I could reference?
I did not, but I will be happy to do so in the next couple of days.
Oh, good. And you just directed to OPEGA and we'll get it. I appreciate your testimony. Thank you.
Will do.
Senator Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a comment and a question. My comment would be, first of all, I would hope that the task force would look at the MCILS report we just received, and in particular, the survey responses, because there were a lot of survey responses from parents' attorneys in terms of things that I think are more about either the department or the judicial branch. So I would certainly encourage your members to look at those survey responses. I think you would find them to be helpful. My question is, has the task force looked at or are they looking at preventive legal advocacy? In particular, I know Detroit just finished up their pilot program for preventive legal services for parents involved in child welfare, and Iowa just passed a law and is starting theirs. And it kind of seems to be a trend. I know Casey Family Services is a big proponent of that. And I'm just wondering if that's something the task force is looking at. Thank you.
It's an excellent question. We have not, as the task force, that issue has not been addressed specifically. However, it is, as you said, very much on the national radar. The task force did last year, as the keynote speaker for our conference, ask for a professor who had run a preventative clinic, a child welfare preventative clinic, to be the keynote speaker. So there was a large focus last year on preventative services for families prior to entering the child welfare system.
Thank you. And for what it's worth, I would ask you to to just kind of put that issue on your agenda for the future. Because studies are showing that it actually keeps children out of the foster care system. So it costs the state less, it's less disruptive to families, and actually, which is the reason Casey Family is a proponent. You know, again, it actually does more to prevent child abuse and neglect, as opposed to letting things get to the point where it's actually in the court system. So thank you.
Happy to do that.
Further questions or comments? Ms. Boardman, you noted the panel did not meet, I'm sorry, you noted the task force did not meet in March. Did they meet since March?
We actually did meet in March. The minutes are not posted on the website.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's my apologies. We met in March, and then we're meeting next week, and then we meet again in January, March. I'd have to get you the actual, we're meeting next week and then again in December for the quarterly requirements.
Was there a quarterly meeting this summer?
No, I believe we had, and I can look back and definitely get back to you. I believe it was January, March, September, and then December. But I can definitely get back to you, most likely by the end of this meeting.
Thank you.
I can get back to you now. March, June, September, December.
Okay. March and June minutes are what I'm interested in seeing.
And I will make sure that the captive coordinator has those available to be posted.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Finally, we've got Mark Moran, who will be presenting on the Child Death and Serious Injury panel. Mr. Moran serves as co-chair. He will tell me if I've mispronounced his last name, I'm sure. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator. You've got it spot on. Senator Libby, Representative McDonald, and members of the Government Oversight Committee. My name is Mark Moran. I'm the chair of the Maine Child Death and Serious Injury Review Panel. I've served in this role since 2014, and I've been a panel member since 2008. I was a Child Protective Services caseworker in Bangor for 5 years, and I've been a hospital-based women's and children's services social worker since 2006. Additionally, I've been a volunteer guardian ad litem in child protection cases for the Maine Court-Appointed Special Advocate Program since 2009. I'm here today to provide you with an overview of the structure and function of the panel, after which I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have. Multidisciplinary child abuse and neglect fatality reviews in Maine began in the early to mid 1980s under former Department of Human Services Commissioner Michael Petit, who I believe you heard from at your August 11th meeting. The review panel was reactivated in the early 90s under former DHS Commissioner Jane Sheehan and eventually codified in Maine statutes in 1993. To the best of my knowledge, these statutes, as they relate to our panel, have not been substantively amended since their adoption. The current panel's mission is to promote child health and well-being, improve child protection systems, and educate the public and professionals who work with children to prevent child deaths and serious injuries. The panel accomplishes this mission through collaborative, multidisciplinary, comprehensive case reviews, from which recommendations to state and local governments and public and private entities are developed. Maine's panel is authorized specifically in Title 22, Section 4004. Under this statute, our purpose is, quote, to recommend to state and local agencies methods of improving the child protection system, including modifications of statutes, rules, policies, and procedures, end quote. The panel's membership is established in the same section, and the panel has historically viewed the members or disciplines specifically referenced in the statute as the minimum membership rather than an exhaustive list. Accordingly, our panel currently has 29 members, including multiple OCFS senior administrators and representing a variety of disciplines. The panel typically meets for 3 hours on the first Friday afternoon of the month, 10 months per year. Under Title 22, Section 4008, quote, the proceedings and records of the panel created in accordance with the Section 4004 are confidential and not subject to subpoena, discovery, or introduction into evidence in a civil or criminal action, end quote. The statute further states, quote, "The commissioner shall disclose conclusions of the review panel upon request, but may not disclose data that is otherwise classified as confidential," end quote. Pursuant to Title 22, Section 4021, the department may issue subpoenas for information relevant to the panel's work. Excuse me. The panel reviews cases in one of three ways. First, the panel periodically reviews and discusses brief summary reports of all child deaths and serious injuries that are reported to OCFS. We refer to these as level 1 reviews, and our intention here is to take a broad view of the kinds of cases, injuries, and deaths being reported, looking for themes or commonalities that would provide good opportunity for further review and for the generation of recommendations. Second, if a theme is identified, the panel may conduct what we call level 2 reviews or cluster reviews. The panel would select 2 to 4 cases that involve some common thread, and over the course of a meeting, dig deeper into those specific cases. The panel is provided with OCFS records of all the selected cases to inform our review. Third, if an individual case is particularly noteworthy, the panel may decide to conduct a level 3 review, our most in-depth review. In addition to being provided OCFS records for the specific case under review, we are also provided with other related records, such as law enforcement reports, mental health records, medical records, or educational records. Some of these may already be contained within the OCFS file for a given case or may need to be obtained via subpoena. Additionally, in a level 3 review, the panel typically invites selected professionals who have been involved in a case to attend a portion of the review meeting. Such professionals might include the OCFS caseworker and supervisor, a detective, school personnel, a public health nurse, a child's pediatrician, or others. This gives the panel an opportunity to ask questions directly to those who are most closely involved with the family or child. It's worth noting that quality case review requires a substantial time commitment of panel members, not only to attend meetings, but also to review the hundreds of pages of records and documentation associated with these cases prior to the panel's monthly meeting. Additionally, some panel members jointly review cases with Maine's Domestic Abuse Homicide Review Panel as standing members of that panel, or at the case-specific invitation of that panel's chair, Ms. Marchese. Beyond the inclusion of a case in a summary report of all child deaths and serious injuries, excuse me, the panel is prohibited from reviewing a case in depth if there is a pending prosecution. This is based on guidance from the Office of the Attorney General pursuant to Title 22, Sections 4004 and 4008. The effect of this restriction, well-reasoned though it may be, is ultimately to delay the panel's review of most child death and serious injury cases for months or years, thus limiting our ability to help influence change in a timely fashion. In addition to our case review work, the panel periodically participates in multiple other activities to inform our primary role. For example, the panel might request a presentation by a subject matter expert on a specific topic related to a recent or upcoming review, or might be educated about a new OCFS policy or practice change. The panel also participates in annual meetings with other similar review teams from the New England states and New Brunswick. Such regional meetings usually involve an educational topic, updates from each state, updates from the National Center for Fatality Review and Prevention, networking opportunities, and sometimes case reviews that involve multiple states' jurisdictions. Regarding the panel's reporting, Maine's relevant statutes do not explicitly require the panel to report at any particular interval or to any particular entity. Historically, the panel has submitted its periodic reports through OCFS to the Office of the Commissioner of Health and Human Services. The panel's influence, however, is quite minimally tied to its formal reporting. Given the multidisciplinary nature of our membership, the recommendations generated by the panel directly and indirectly influence real-time policy and practice decisions in several arenas, including but not limited to OCFS. Some additional examples of more recent ways the panel has attempted to influence children's welfare in Maine include sending a letter from the panel to the Board of Licensure in Medicine about mandatory reporting requirements, submitting legislative testimony on behalf of the panel, and working with the Maine chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics to further educate medical providers about recognition of child abuse and neglect. The panel is currently in the process of finalizing a report summarizing its work over the past 5 years and has developed a process and timeline to support the publication of annual reports moving forward. In closing, I would like to impress upon you a few key points related to the panel's work. First, the welfare of Maine's children is everyone's job, not just that of OCFS. The child welfare system is far more broad than OCFS caseworkers, supervisors, and administrators. That includes not just professionals who have direct contact with children and families, such as law enforcement, educators, the medical community, counselor types, and judicial system members, among many others, but also every other citizen in our communities, including our elected officials, who directly or indirectly help create, sustain, or alter the environments in which children are being raised. Second, these now 5 publicly reported child homicides since June 1, 2021 may be the current focus of the media, the legislature, and our communities. But please understand that these recent high-profile cases are but a small fraction of the bad outcomes and experiences children have at the hands of their caregivers. It is easy, perhaps even natural, to want to place blame on a person or a group or an agency when something bad happens to a child. Finding a target for our emotion may make us feel better, but it ultimately does little or nothing to improve the next child's chances. Where did and where do we, the broad child welfare system, fail not only these deceased children, but also the many others you won't hear about? What needs to change systemically to prevent such failures in the future? These are incredibly complex cases that warrant very complex considerations. None of us is smart enough to do this work alone. Timely case reviews conducted by broadly experienced multidisciplinary groups are critical. Third, and finally, the current attention garnered by these recent cases creates an opportunity to examine and improve not just the factors that contributed to bad outcomes for children and families, but also to examine and improve the ways in which the system responds to such events. I, on behalf of my fellow panel members, appreciate the opportunity to address the committee today, and I look forward to being able to provide whatever assistance I can as we all work together to improve our broad child welfare system. Thank you for your time and attention. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Moran, for your presentation and for your written testimony. In the middle of your testimony, you talk about your limited ability to impact policies and procedures of OCFS in real time because of the AG opinion on 2 sections of statute that prevent information from being shared until after litigation is complete. So maybe a couple parts to a question. One, are you aware of this restriction in other states, or do similar panels have to operate under that same kind of ridiculous restriction? Number 2, do you have suggestions how we might get around that or create a workaround of some kind? I mean, towards the end of your testimony, you talk about how frustrating it is to be in this situation, how you want to find a party to blame, but in lieu of that, finding concrete answers, sort of helps with that very issue, and so we can't get timely answers, and human nature is to find a scapegoat. So kind of in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. I guess I'll ask you to speak to the first 2 parts of my question.
Sure. First, to be clear, I'm not advocating for a blaming approach. I'm advocating for an understanding of the circumstances that led to the adverse outcome to begin with. To your specific question, I'm not aware of whether other states have similar restrictions. Off the top of my head, I would turn to my colleagues at the National Center for Fatality Review and Prevention. I'm happy to pose that question if that would be helpful to you. Secondly, the reasons for, as I understand them from our Attorney General's office, for this prohibition have to do with 2 factors. One is specifically the potential to create conflicting duties for some of our panel members. So we have both civil and criminal attorneys general, assistant attorneys general on the panel. We have district attorneys on the panel, as Ms. Johnson indicated earlier, law enforcement officers, others who would have a duty to present information to a court should information be relevant to a given prosecution. For example, if some exculpatory evidence were to be uncovered in a panel review while an ongoing case was taking place, that could create a conflict where the panel member would be restricted from sharing it by our confidentiality statute, but their professional and ethical duties would require them to notify the court. So avoiding that conflict is one of the rationales. The other piece has to do with...
On that point, could I just get a quick bit of clarification?
Sure.
Would a person, before opening a case file, with presented, having been presented a name of the case, would that member not be able to recuse themselves before opening that case file?
I don't know that it's a specific case-related issue. My understanding is that the assistant attorneys general, as representatives of that office, if Ms. Marchese's division, for example, was prosecuting a homicide case, but a civil assistant attorney general in a child protection capacity in a different division were to come upon some information or some evidence that might create a circumstance of conflict for them.
Understood.
And secondly, the additional reason that I understand to be the basis for our prohibition is that our statute states that the panel's findings and information are confidential. The opinion from our Attorney General's office over the years has fairly consistently been to avoid the potential for a court to want to try to order disclosure of that information, thus piercing the confidentiality shield afforded by the statute. So I'm not a lawyer, I'm a clinical social worker. I'm not sure I can give you a better answer than that as it has been explained to me. In terms of suggestions for how to avoid that, the panel membership as defined by statute, or as at least minimally defined by statute, includes district attorneys and civil and criminal assistant attorneys general. And so the easy solution in my mind would be to not include those folks in a timely review, perhaps re-examine a case after a prosecution is done. But I don't know how we do that with our current statute in terms of required members being what it is.
Thank you. Appreciate that answer. I'm struggling a bit with trying to see how your panel fits into the constellation of oversight systems when you have this anchor, holding you back on confidentiality and timeliness of opening case files. I think legislators may be interested in examining that question a bit more.
And if I could just comment briefly, you've used the word, and others have used the word oversight repeatedly today. I don't view our panel as one of oversight of OCFS. And perhaps this is more a semantics issue than anything else, but we have no authority over OCFS. We have no authority over the department. Our role is to review cases and make recommendations for system improvement, not to hold anyone's feet to the fire or impose some kind of consequence for failure to perform in a certain way.
I appreciate that. I think it could be semantics. I think the legislature provides an oversight role. It captures all of the terms you've described, but I would describe the panel as reviewing the work of OCFS and making recommendations on the process. That very much to me is oversight. But understand that word might mean different things to different people.
Sure.
Senator Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just following up on that, I'm looking at the statute. The purpose of the panel is to recommend to state and local agencies methods of improving the child protection system, including modifications of statutes, rules, policies, and procedures. My question is, though, I just want to make sure I understand correctly. This panel is established by the department. You make recommendations to the department, and the only information that is disclosed to the public is filtered through the department. Is that accurate?
Unless we make recommendations to other entities, then yes. And I would reference my example of the letter we sent to the Board of Licensure in Medicine. I believe it was early 2020, prior to the pandemic developing, regarding reminding physicians in particular about specific mandatory reporting language in the state statute. That letter was published in their board newsletter to all of their members. So that would be one example of how other entities would receive our information.
Okay, so other entities might publish things, but recommendations to the department the only information released to the public, again, is that authorized by the commissioner. Is that accurate?
Essentially, yes. Some of those things would be included in the periodic reporting that the panel produces. The department typically would, the report would include a response from OCFS to the recommendations of the panel, what has been done, for example, in the interim to address those things. And that would be then presented to the commissioner's office.
Right. It's not, again, that report is not public, correct?
Not unless someone requests it from the commissioner's office.
Right. And again, she or whoever the commissioner is has discretion whether to release it and or what part to release. My question really is, it seems like a very closed system. And I just want to make sure that I understand it when I'm reaching that conclusion.
I suppose it is to some degree a closed system, but my understanding, not having been part of the panel in the mid-90s, of course, is that is by design, given the specific, very intimate, confidential details of a given family circumstance, of a given child circumstance. We don't issue recommendations based on single case reports. We tend to shy away from knee-jerk type reactions to individual case specifics, instead looking for the larger kind of threads that flow throughout cases.
All right, thank you. Just one other quick question, Mr. Chair. It sounds to me, again, from your testimony and looking at the statute and what I'm hearing, the only attorneys involved in the system on the panel are all state attorneys, correct?
We have the attorneys that I referenced, both civil and criminal assistant attorneys general, 2 district attorneys, and we also have the guardian ad litem coordinator within the main judicial branch, who is part of our panel as well.
Okay, so again, just state employees. No parents attorneys, no criminal defense attorneys, etc.
That is accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bailey. Senator DeChambeau.
Thank you, Senator Libby. I really like this report. I think it's all in yellow. I've highlighted so many areas, but you said that the main statutes were codified in 1993, and then you go on to say that under the statute, your purpose is to recommend to state and local agencies methods of improving the system, including modifications to statutes, rules, policies, procedures. I circle statutes because then you also said, to the best of your knowledge, since 93, there have not been substantially any amended since the adoptions of statutes. And I'm wondering if that means, usually, the department or the commissioner submits their own request for a bill to change a statute, or there may be a representative who wishes, or someone approaches the representative. What is your authority at that moment? Even if you or that panel had a recommendation to modify a statute, can you do that yourself or the panel, or does that have to come from the commissioner?
So I would just, before I get into the meat of that answer, I would just clarify what I referenced when I said that the statute hasn't changed. The specific statutes that describe the structure and function of my panel are the things that haven't changed. Yeah. Certainly other statutes have changed over the years. Right. And in direct response, I would say we have made recommendations within our meetings to the department, excuse me, specifically related to statutory changes over the years. I'm not prepared to provide you a specific example off the top of my head, But when the department does propose its bills each session, I'm confident that those proposals for changes are at least in part fueled by discussions that Ms. Johnson has been part of at the panel meetings, or Dr. Landry or others at the department as well.
Thank you for clarifying that. You can read it two ways, and I thank you for clarifying that it's your purpose hasn't substantially changed.
Yes,
all right.
structure and function. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. Further questions or comments for Mr. Moran?
Wow.
Seeing none, thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from any of these panels? Lucia, is there anyone else from anyone on these panels in our waiting room? No.
No, we're all set with that agenda item.
Any other comments or questions from the committee on this agenda item? I know we are past the lunch hour, so folks might be getting close to wrapping up. We'll obviously continue our conversation on the subject at our November meeting. Unfinished business, we have none. After that, we've got a report from the director on status of OPEGA projects in process. Director Newsom.
Thank you, Senator Libby. So you have in your packets the spreadsheet table with all the current OPEGA projects on the work plan. So you can read through updates for those. I guess I'll highlight a few things that came up today. So for the Maine Commission on Indigent Legal Services, there was, as I mentioned earlier, a piece of work related to indigency determination that was going along, that we're sort of trying to figure out how to wrap up and when, based on the demands of the Child Protective Services work. So we will keep you posted on that. The full evaluation of the credit for the rehabilitation of historic properties, which is a tax expenditure project, is in the process of the report being drafted, and we're getting that ready to present to you in November. The folks are also working actively on the evaluation of the research expense tax credit. Also in the tax arena, we have our annual review of all tax expenditures that are classified for expedited review. So those first two I mentioned are full-blown evaluations. Every year we do a review of a larger group at an expedited level, and we're actively working on wrapping that up and getting it to the taxation committee by mid-December, when that's due to them. And then also staff are engaged in the study group that Senator Libby and other members are involved with, looking at the overall tax expenditure review process with the members of the taxation committee. It's my understanding they're going to start meeting later this month. And finally, coming to Child Protective Services, we have been working actively since the last meeting on developing a detailed work plan for the pieces of work that are due in January and March. Doing careful planning can help us make sure we focus and can achieve those deadlines. A member of the OPEGA staff attended the systems mapping meetings, which was part at DHHS, which was part of the Casey Family Programs and their subcontractor collaborative safety. So that was part of their case reviews for the cases that they were looking at under contract to DHHS. So we had someone from our office attend those meetings, which is, will be very helpful and informative. And we'll be looking, as mentioned earlier, to schedule the presentation of that report when it's due later in the fall. So staff have been initiating what we would normally call preliminary research, but it's getting folded into our just heading right into this project, which includes reviewing relevant state and federal laws and rules, relevant evaluation projects and reports that have been done by other states to help inform and give us guidance to develop a very effective and efficient project, and starting to schedule meetings with the agencies involved. the groups that you just heard from, they will be a big part of our work for the report that's due in January on the system of oversight. We do tend to use that word in a very broad way, oversight of child protective services broadly. And so we will be doing a lot of follow-up work, speaking to those panels and learning a lot more about them to be able to report back to you about how that system works together and areas for improvement. So that is where we are at this point. Hopefully we will be able to get a presentation of the Casey Family Programs work will be done, and we can get a presentation for you in November if that's possible. And I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah, we've been pretty busy with all those projects, but we'll just keep plugging along and, keep you updated.
Thank you, Lucia. Questions or comments from the committee? Okay. Last item is planning for upcoming meeting. Chairs wanted to propose skipping the October meeting to provide additional time for staff to make progress on the projects we've tasked them with on a pretty expedited and challenging timeline. So is there any objection from the committee for skipping October and reconvening in November? No objection. Is there any objection to having that meeting on Zoom? Hearing no objection, it appears to be unanimous. Senator Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What would the date be in November, please?
The second Wednesday, which is second Wednesday.
The 10th of November.
10th of November. Thank you, Representative McDonald. 10 o'clock on November 10th on Zoom. All right. Any other business? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Representative McDonald made the motion to adjourn, seconded by
I'll second that.
Representative Stover. All in favor? All opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I
Bye-bye.